Right, this is a wish I saw on the previous minutes of the true and correct record.
Great, yeah.
Thank you. Apologies for absence. Okay, and that's it, otherwise a full house. A few things to tell everybody, I'm sure you've heard them before. But if a fire alarm bells and rings, it's not a practice, so please exit using the fire escape there or the way you come in. Please switch your mobile phone to silent, which I haven't done yet. We've got a habit of giving money to the chairman's fund if you get caught with a mobile phone going on. So you wouldn't want to pay that, would you? The proceedings are being recorded. Speakers will have 3 minutes. After that you'll hear a tone and asked to wind up. If you don't, you'll be told to wind up. It's the only opportunity for the public to speak, so please do not interrupt during the rest of the debate. And I can ask, I'm sure you won't, but don't hiss, clap, boo or cheer please if you don't like something somebody's saying or you do like it. During the meeting you'll see various people talking to each other, which looks like bad manners. Probably looks like bad manners, but it's the only way we can continue the meeting on to get answers while you're talking. We're answering your points. Right, members, update on performance. We're still doing okay, although I've lost my list at the moment. 84% we're determining on time, which is excellent, far better than a couple of years ago. And it's still 3% on appeal, with 8 appeals pending, but we still have quite a few months to go. September, isn't it?
End of September.
Yeah. Okay. Right, members' interests. Councillor Owens first.
Yes, a lot of people in the room I know, and some are my friends.
Well, that happens very often.
Yeah. So,
Councillor Patchett.
Thank you, Chairman. With regards to the Vital application, I do know this house quite well because the Vital Faith is held there, so I've been to that place on many occasions. I just wanted to point that out later on.
Okay. Councillor.
Two things, Chair. One, Councillor Smith gave me his apologies last night for not being here, so I wasn't fast into passing those on.
Right.
And secondly, 0213, I live on the same road as the applicant, but probably about 80 to 100 yards apart.
Okay. We did talk about it before, which you asked you did find interesting. You're quite a long way from them as well. Okay, thank you. Any others? Okay, passing a written arrangement.
no.
Members of the public, that means we don't get together beforehand and decide how we're going to vote. That is not done, or never has been. Right. There are no applications withdrawn, but we do intend to take the, I think it's called Arden, wasn't it? Application first. So that will be taken out of order and dealt with first, then there'll be a break for anybody who wants to go to go. Also, there is an item of urgent business which we will be discussing later on. We'll talk about it when we get to it.
Before we start, Chairman, I'm happy to speak to people away from myself.
Oh, yes. Yeah, okay. We don't normally like people standing because it's very intimidating for people. Plus that, it hurts the water after an hour.
If not, you want to wait myself.
Okay, we move on to 0083, application Arden. Mr. Allen.
This site has an extant 2009 permission for a family traveller site which has established the basis of such a development in this location. committee will record refusing permission for the previous application on this site, contrary to the officer's recommendation, for 7 non-family travelling units with 7 day bands with a new amenities building, for reasons of visual intrusion and sustainability, implying an unsustainable location for the number of units that were sought. This was partly against the backdrop of the lack of specific policy allocations for traveller units. The revised application in front of us tonight is for a reduced number of additional pitches to only 2, with 2 day bands and an extension to a stable building and an extension only to an amenities building. A key difference is that this application is for a family site only, whereas the previous proposal was for general occupation, albeit primarily friends and family acquaintances. The officer report sets out in significant detail the planning considerations in favour of this proposal. However, I intend to set out a few salient points. The reduced number and siting of the mobile units on the southern boundary will bring about, in my opinion, a less visually intrusive development than beforehand, which can be mitigated by further landscaping, particularly across the northern, which is the on photograph in front of you, the pitch which is established, and potentially the eastern boundary, which adjoins the edge of the immediate building you can see there. I'd reiterate that policy H6 sets out an expectation that local planning authorities positively facilitate traveller provision, and in the case of Daventry District Council, 8 further pitches by the year 2017, among hierarchies beyond that. This is both through policy and development management process. In this context, 2 additional units will bring about a reasonable and sustainable contribution to that supply, and which could also be met elsewhere, that would, in my opinion, no longer result in an overdevelopment of the site. Although there will be some reliance on the private car, the increase in journeys to access services not catered for in the immediate vicinity will only be modest and significantly less than if 7 units were proposed. Another sustainability benefit of the proposal is that the family units will be in close proximity to one another on this site rather than being on separate sites. I will briefly discuss a late representation. Kettering Borough Council is effectively concerned that the site and location are unsustainable for any form of increase in the number of units, and that to approve this application may affect that authority's management of the number of sites in their own district, including the one opposite at Greenfields. However, this particular local authority, like all others, has a duty to manage its own provision. And as case officer, I believe that the increase stipulated in this proposal will sustainably assist in providing the units that this council has a requirement and duty to deliver. On balance and on its individual merits, this proposal is considered acceptable and sustainable, and subject to the conditions recommended in the report, including the family tie, I recommend approval.
Thank you, Bruce. Before we go on to continue with this, I should have welcomed new members to the committee. So I do apologise to new members. First of all, Nigel Carr, who's sitting at the back. He's been on this committee years ago.
Excuse me, Chairman, could you speak up a little bit, please?
Can't you hear me?
Right. You're unusually quiet.
All right, I'm usually quiet. Anyway, welcome back, Nigel. Ian Robertson, who is a member of this committee and has done his training, which allows him to vote. And tonight we have another new member who's not on the committee, but he's done his training and ready to speak and pounce when there is a vacancy, and that's Richard Algar. Thank you. So I do apologise, members. I should have done. Welcome back to all the other members. Right, we've got several speakers. Because we've allowed more speakers than we normally allow, I intend to give the agent a longer time to compensate for it. If we don't, it will be challenged on appeal. So I intend to do it now, which I believe is right and correct. So we'll start off with Mrs. Stanley, who's against the application.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Daventry and Kettering together cover 350 square miles and have a population of over 172,000. However, nearly all of the gypsies populating the two authorities live in 9 square miles that also house our small villages. 29 Daventry pitches and over 50 Kettering ones. We are overwhelmed. Both Kettering's officers and Keith Thursfield have expressed the additional development in this location will give rise to impacts that cannot be mitigated and would cause considerable harm. This is already illustrated by 8 new applicants across the road at Greenfields stating that the permanent permission granted at Golden Stables is proof that this area is not unsuitable for travellers according to one LPA. The most recent of these 8 is for 16 individuals. If wives and younger children also move on, it would increase to 26 people on just one pitch. Research has shown that there is a close link between the lack of quality sites and poor physical and mental health, lower life expectancy and poorer education outcomes in the gypsy community. This needs to be addressed. Quality sites need to be built in sustainable locations, close to schools, medical facilities, and with opportunities for social inclusion with the wider community. This location, however, has been judged by various government inspectors as an isolated location which would not be economically, socially, or environmentally sustainable, and that outstanding unmet needs do not outweigh the harm. They could not be clearer. It is a requirement of the MPPF that you should refuse an application if any adverse impacts of agreeing it would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. This application is contrary to paragraphs 14, 17, 55, 61 and 109 of the MPPF and also policies S1, R2 and H6 of the West Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy 2014. Golden Stables exists because it was easier and expedient for Daventry to allow it, helped by the policies of a different ideology. The policies and intentions of this government are radically different, with further stricter policy due to be released very soon. No conditions will ameliorate the damage caused, and as previous conditions have not been enforced, we have no faith that they would be in the future. We, the communities surrounding this site, beg you to refuse this permission for all of the many reasons you have heard from all who oppose it. Please have regard for us with fairness and probity. Refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Mr. Blake, Arvingworth Parish Council.
Yes, sir. I'm here today on behalf of Arvingworth Parish Council to ask that you refuse this application to double the size of Golden Stables. We are extremely disappointed that the case officer's report has recommended this application for approval. Once again, this recommendation is so that Daventry District can meet its requirements to provide additional traveller pitches in the district. It is not an impartial assessment of the true impacts of this application. It is an inappropriate attempt to rectify the lack of planning policy and pitches for the travelling community in this district. The interpretation of national and local planning policies to justify this recommendation is disingenuous. The recommendation is contrary to the opinions and policy interpretations of Kettering Borough Council. It ignores numerous planning inspector reports on the neighbouring Greenfield site, who have more than once described this area as, and I quote, a wholly unsustainable location economically, environmentally and socially. This recommendation even ignores the written words of another Daventry District officer, Keith Thursfield, who previously wrote a strong objection letter on behalf of this council against applications at the neighbouring Greenfield site. The sudden change of opinion on this location and type of development, because it is 25 metres into Daventry District rather than 25 metres into Kettering Borough, is astounding. Aside from 3 parish councils, 2 MPs and 1 neighbouring borough council objecting, in the order of 80 or so local residents have also written to object, many of whom are here tonight. These objectors are frustrated by the continued intrusion into open countryside of traveller developments. The visual impact and effect on the character and appearance of the local countryside is significant, with the last planning appeal on Greenfields being dismissed for this very reason. Such an application would be completely unacceptable if it were for housing. If the history of previous traveller applications is being ignored, let's instead look at the present. This application is one of 10 current planning applications for traveller sites from 3 different locations, all less than 1.5 miles from this site. These 10 applications propose over 14 fixed mobile homes, over 20 touring caravan plots, and 10 permanent utility blocks. This is on top of the nigh on 82 pitches already within 3 miles of this site. At what point will cross-border cumulative impact be taken into account? On behalf of Arlingworth Parish Council, I ask that you listen to the overwhelming, numerous and diverse objections and reject this application. To quote Keith Thursfield, your own Development Control Manager, to otherwise grant permission for the current application would risk setting a precedent for various other traveller-related developments in this area, potentially on both sides of the district boundary, which would then be extremely difficult to resist. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Daventry, Harrington Parish Council.
I'm Chairman of Harrington Parish Council, and I ask you to reject this application. I say that as someone who lives locally and who can see the damage that's being done to the countryside and to communities by allowing inappropriate, unsustainable development. But for an expert professional view, I, like Mr. Blake, quote your own Keith Thursfield, who in a letter to Kevin wrote to strongly object to a similar proposal at Greenfields, just the other side of the single-track highway, writing, "While we appreciate that the site falls inside a separate district from Golden Stables, it clearly forms part of the same locality, and in these circumstances it is quite arbitrary to draw artificial lines. Although the relevant circulars, Regional Plan and GTAA in particular, allocate certain levels of gypsy and traveller-related development for each district, it is equally important to respect local planning policies, or PPGs, PPS 7 for instance, seeking to protect any given part of the countryside against the cumulative impact of a succession of developments, and conversely seeking to encourage an appropriate distribution of such development, preferably in sustainable locations close to the major road or other transport. Even the national and regional policies that are directly relevant to traveller development still expects councils to take more localised material considerations into account. The land to the south of the highway, which is adjacent to Golden Stables, falls within a special landscape area where stronger rural planning controls apply. An undue concentration of developments of the type applied for in these two applications in this locality is considered unsuitable, especially given the narrowness of the adjoining highway and the quiet character of this rural vicinity. To grant permission for the current application would risk setting a precedent for the various other traveller-related developments in this area, potentially on both sides of the district boundary, which would then be extremely difficult to resist, despite their scale and other potential problems associated with future development. Daventry District Council approved Golden Stables on the basis it would be a strictly conditioned, small-scale traveller site, as evidenced by the conditions in our committee report. In other words, this was effectively granted as an exception to the usual policy restrictions for rural areas and other site-specific factors applicable to this site. Principally through this careful exercise of control, Golden Stables remains a discrete and non-prominent site, whose impact is well contained by the entrance features comprising a fence, gate and other landscaping in the area. The approval of any of the current two applications clearly risks setting a precedent for Golden Stables to inappropriately expand and also become visually intrusive in the locality. The visual intrusion of Golden Stables, this is my words now, has increased significantly since 2011 because the screening hedge has been lowered and in part removed, revealing the unit's and exterior lighting. So I urge you to reject this application and not to make a further exception for this site to allow expansion which your own planning department has acknowledged would be inappropriate.
We don't have a name, but is there a representative from Brayville Parish Council?
No, I did very well.
Okay, that's fair enough. Okay, Mr. Wayne, who's the agent? You can have more than 3 minutes, Mr. Wayne. You can have at least 5 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. I haven't arranged for 5 minutes. Are you all right for me standing here?
Yes, we
In
can
amongst
hear
all
you.
the councillors?
No problem.
Okay, I just said that. Okay, Chairman, councillors. Obviously, you've got a very full report, and I want to just highlight a number of relevant facts. Firstly, as has been pointed out to you, you have a shortfall of gypsy pitches in the district, 8 at the moment, 20 overall. Secondly, this site is some distance from any settlement and does not dominate any of them, and that's a factor that's important when you look at these sort of sites. Thirdly, this is an existing site occupied by a single family with 2 mobile homes and traveller vans permitted in 2009. 6 years on, the family now have a requirement for the 2 additional mobile homes and 2 traveller vans. These are for the applicant's son and his partner, and the applicant's daughter, her husband, and 20-month-old son. These are the son and daughter of the family who have lived on the site since 2009. And the application reflects the growth of the children and their needs. In 2009, the future needs of the children at that time could not be foreseen, and 2 mobile homes was all that was applied for and permitted. The application also involves an extension to the stable block to facilitate an increase in the applicant's horse breeding stock. This is not a speculative application, bringing new gypsy families or individuals into the area, as is the case on the other side of the road, which has been referred to. The objections to an increase in pitches in this location have to be seen on the basis of a modest increase of an existing site and the family reasons and needs. The committee previously considered the application for 7 not in a sustainable location. Chairman, sustainability has 3 dimensions: economic, social and environmental. The economic role is met by the development being seen as the right type in the right place at the right time. As set out, this proposal is to expand a small family site established over 6 years ago. National advice is to permit family-based gypsy sites where there is control of the occupants. This is not the case, for example, of the Just-In site, which is referred to. The alternative is that family members will be on different sites or on the side of the road. The social role is to keep the family together. The environmental aspect has been to reduce further any impact of additional mobile homes and their location on the site from the previous application. By living on one site, it also reduces the need to travel between sites. So, Chairman, this application is a sustainable proposal with no highway or amenity issues, and as such was so considered in 2009 when permission was first granted. It's clear from the detail of the officer's report that great care has been taken to consider all aspects of the proposal, including objections. And I will just put them aside here, Chairman, because I have great difficulty trying to understand any planned reasons for objecting to this proposal. In the penultimate paragraph of the report, you have clear advice of your officers that the proposal complies with national and local policies and guidance. In addition, you have the genuine need of the family. I would respectfully ask that you allow this modest family-based application subject to the conditions set out. And I would just like to make one point that's come through in the comments that I've heard this evening. And this relates to Mr. Thursfield's comments, which have been taken completely out of context. And I'm sorry he's not here tonight to actually say that. But in fact, if you look at the detail, it's out of context and completely unreasonable. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Wayne. Local members, we've talked to them before the meeting. The local member is not on the committee is going to speak first. So, Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Chairman. As one of the district councillors for Welford Ward, I'm here to speak on behalf of the residents of the said ward, and I fully understand that I represent everybody who lives in the ward, the gypsy and travelling community and the settled communities. I also believe that the accommodation needs of the gypsy and travelling community are important, and we should do all we can to help and support them in this endeavour. I have reviewed the planning application for the proposed expansion of the Golden Stables site, and I have noted the recommendations for this application as approved, and I consider this recommendation significant as it comes from the strategic agency staffed by professional and knowledgeable persons. However, there is also significant counter-argument as to why this application should be rejected. The depth and consistency of these arguments from many different sources caused me to attend Golden Stables site myself to see it and to get the experience of exactly what everybody was talking about. It is very evident that this is a very isolated and remote site. There is little or no amenities in the area, no access to public transport, and little or no chance of integration. It literally is in the middle of nowhere. In conclusion, Chair, I respectfully suggest that the application is rejected, as the planning is unsustainable and is not conducive to the well-being of those people who intend to live there. And in closing, I feel it appropriate to say, as a newly appointed councillor, that I feel as a council we need to work with the gypsy and travelling community to come up with a strategic plan, thought through and considered, so that future applications are done in a manner which is conducive to the harmony and the peace of the Daventry District Council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, after that, as an old member, I feel that I am going to be a broken record. We had a planning application in front of us in January. And firstly, I would like to thank the officer for the report. It's a very extensive report. We have letter of our 2 MPs, we have the position of catering, and I would also like to thank Mr. McCann, the applicant, for putting an application in front of us. So we are dealing with an application that is not retrospective, and therefore I am very thankful. Now, what has changed since January this year? Yes, they have listened to some concern in January where people thought it's the number of caravan and would be smaller. It might be acceptable. Now, my concern, the site was allowed in 2009. 2009 was with another regime. We didn't have the NPPF. Now we have, after that, we have 2 inspectors who have repeatedly said that the site across the road is not suitable for an accommodation of a gypsy and traveller site. So therefore, with the new regime, the NPPF, I do still think that what we decided in January this year still stands. We can argue about the visual impact, but I do think that even 2 caravans will have a visual impact, but I will let the member to decide for me. Otherwise, the reason for refusal still stands. Also, I think it is erroneous to say that the site is sustainable. And like my colleague, Richard Olga, I would like to have a proper policy for gypsy and traveller. It's absolutely unfair to put or to have planning application because of lack of policy. We have that for when we didn't have our 5-year land supply, and we have that also for the gypsy and traveller. We know that in September we are going to start to have a consultation about the gypsy and traveller policy and the site. I think it is essential for the community, the settled community and the gypsy and traveller community to work together. Last week we had a report about the education of the gypsy and traveller. It is really so sad to read because in the population they are the lowest for the grade of GCSE A to C. I couldn't remember exactly the figure, but it was very sad to see. So with the site where it is, no access to school, it's alone, they will depend to car. So on that note, I would like to assure Mr. McCann and his family that we will find proper site where it's not going to be isolated, it's not going to have a crisis, because now I think the villages of Great Oxenden, Braybrook, Ardingworth and Arrington have also accepted, and you will notice that when Mr. McCann put a planning application in 2009, the problem didn't exist because you didn't have this problem on Greenfield, but we cannot, and I will beg the committee not to take into account Greenfield because it is so important for our decision tonight. So I would like, if you allow me, Chairman, to propose that the application is refused once again for a smaller site, and for the same reason, except if the officer advised me that we could drop the overdevelopment. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do you have a second? Oh, you do have a second. Councillor. Would you like to speak on it?
Not at the moment, thanks.
Okay. Right, Councillor Patchett and Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a little bit disappointed that the community doesn't have any faith in our enforcement actions and things. I think that we do generally do a reasonable job.
Excuse me, could you start again?
Excuse me. I was saying that I was disappointed that the community doesn't have any faith in our enforcement action team. I think we do a reasonable job generally. But the one thing that I did want to ask was that would Mr. Brickham be solely responsible for all the council tax that is charged on that site? Should it be bigger than it is now?
Officers?
That is outside of my consideration, but I can advise that council tax is applicable to different properties, including caravans, houseboats, properties of the whole range. So that is not a planning consideration to this meeting.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. Clarification, please. The site that is being referred to across the road, has that not been cleared, or is it due to be cleared? And I echo the agent's words regarding the letter from Keith Thursfield taken out of context. I have a problem with this application. When it was here before, I thought it would be overcrowded. I have every empathy for local residents, but what we have before us is an application that has to stand alone. It can't stand alone in Kettering because we're in Daventry. At the previous application time, I suggested, maybe inadvertently, I don't know, that the numbers could be reduced. And when I said reduced, I meant reduced considerably. We're not talking about a small site, we're talking about quite a large site. So the site itself, I feel, is capable of taking the smaller number. Now, we talk about sustainability, economics and all the rest of it. Sustainability, could we take on board how far it is to a doctor? Could we take on board how far it is to a school? The problem that I have, many villages in our 73 parishes have similar problems. That, you know, the school is far away. The economics are such that buses will not run purely simply because of the economics. You can't blame anybody for wanting to make money for business. So I do have a problem. My problem is I have empathy with all the villages. We went on an extensive site survey, and not only a site survey, but surrounding the site, the local environs, looking at the other sites in Kettering, and I'm grateful to the local member for her knowledge in directing us to those sites. Therefore, at this moment, with your if I could think of the word, I would I could leave the balance of my submission until later.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. Quite a few points I'd like to bring up. Councillor Ajak,
Walker.
Sorry, says that this is in complete seclusion. Well, they've been there since 2009 with a proper planning application that was approved, and they're still there. So perhaps they like being in seclusion. As long as they're happy, does it matter where they are, whether they're in the middle of the town or they're on the road? As far as we've been told, no complaints have been received by this council in connection with this site. What goes on across the road is entirely different, and that doesn't come under us, that comes under Kettering. We're told that Braybrook has no school and few amenities, and I believe that goes with 2 other villages as well. So they have to go somewhere else to go to school, to go to shops, and they have to use cars. Well, that puts them in the same position as the people on this site. We are told in the joint care strategy that between 2012 and 2017 we're supposed to approve 8 residential pitches. So far, Daventry District hasn't approved any in that time. Also, in the joint care strategy, and I must admit I've been looking at Mr. Wayne's design and access statement. Policies H7 of the residential pitch requirements for gypsies and travellers says government guidance suggests a maximum of 15 pitches if conducted, while practical experience indicates up to 6 pitches containing family groups works well, and this reflects the preference of residents and site managers. Well, this will be a family site. The same thing goes for people in the villages around there that want to have family come to live with them. Perhaps they will put in for an extension, and there's a good chance that we will grant it. This is exactly the same as that. Children have grown up, gone somewhere else, and they want to come back and live with their parents. And I don't see any reason why we shouldn't say no to that. Why we should say no to that, sorry. The Greenfield site is on the side of the hill, and you can see it for quite a way around. But Golden Stables is on the top of the hill, and you cannot see that from down the bottom of the hill because there's hedges around it. We've had comments made about hedges around the other side, but I'll say the same as I did before. If you look at those hedges, they've been cut down and laid properly, and they've got new growth in them. They've been done the right way, the old-fashioned way, and in a few years' time, they will be better hedges than the ones around the front. And for all these reasons, I think we should approve it.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Chaplin.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I wanted to pick up 1 or 2 points that people have mentioned already. For the avoidance of doubt and confusion, policy H7 was renumbered to H6 following the second determination. So if you think that you've heard of 2 policies, you've heard of the same policy with a different number in the joint core strategies. It's okay, you can see how with the development of an application over a period of time that this confusion might creep in. The second point I wanted to make is that we are, now that the core strategy has been adopted, working at the Part 2 plans, which includes the Gypsies, Travellers and Travelling Show People plan. So we should have a policy. Well, give us enough time to produce a policy, and we will have one. Meanwhile, we have a commitment in the core strategy for a number of pitches, which you've already heard of. I was disturbed to hear comments about a proper site, implying that the current situation at Golden Stables is not proper in some way. I think it's worth pointing out that this is a lawful occupation of a site for a use which was granted permission in 2009. I should also point out that as far as this authority is concerned, the application is entirely conformant with policy. And we had a reference to the fact that we have a new regime, including the National Planning Policy Framework. The National Planning Policy Framework says that if an application comes before you which is lawful and conformant with policy, permission should be granted without delay. So I think, therefore, Chairman, I cannot support the proposition that we have before us.
Thank you, Councillor Chalmers. Councillor Irving-Sword.
Yes, I would like to add something. In 2009, when the application was granted, the school existed in Greybrook. Since then, the school has closed. So in 2009, the people from Golden Stable could walk. Now that is not the case anymore. Also, how often do we have a planning application in front of us where you have two MP who have said very clearly their concern, and it is concern about the new NPPF speak about social cohesion, and I will say it again. Social cohesion means that the traveller and the traveller community and the settled community have to live together, and we have done so for many years. What changed fundamentally the balance was in 2011 when across the border, which is the road, something changed us. We should, and as Councillor Chandler said, we are going to look at a proper policy. I think it's essential. Our lack of policy, since I've been elected, and that is in 2011, I have battled to say that we need a proper policy for gypsy and travellers. I have been on so many courses. I have listened to both sides of the argument, and I think I didn't say that the site wasn't proper. I think it wasn't sustainable. It was granted permission because we had a lack of policy, and we said, well, nobody objects, so let be there. And Mr. McCann has caused no problem, and people in the village know it's not about the applicant, it's about the consequence. If that application is granted, that is why people are concerned, and I share that concern. So I will ask the committee to think carefully before voting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Branchman.
Thank you, Chairman. If I may seek a little clarification. Excuse me. On page 75, number 3, the condition states that all the residents will be, in effect, members of the family. And I'm just wondering, is that an enforceable condition? And how would we enforce it?
It's been written with a view to being monitorable and enforceable. We're not supposed to put conditions on unless they are, so it is.
I was more concerned about how we would enforce it.
Could obtain records or you know.
There is a similar conditions exist elsewhere. That is an enforceable condition.
It is, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Branchman. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight I've listened to people talk about the sites is not sustainable for economic use, etc., and that there's no school or amenities, doctors, etc., within probably a few mile of the site. But how many times do we see the school run take place in the morning, where people take the children to school? Most of the people tend to use their vehicles today. The 5 conditions that I see that our officers have put on, I think, are excellent, and that should cover the worries that the other councillors have mentioned about the site growing in size. If it's just kept for the family, I really can't see any reason why we could refuse this report, because if you've got no grounds, as I see reading this report, on planning grounds, not because our MPs are concerned about the detrimental effects, I'd hate to see this go to appeal and cost a lot of money if we haven't got no back in there for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Council. I think officers would like to say something. You'd like to say something as well. Well, we'll have some answers from officers and then I'll bring it. Okay?
I've just been taking some notes during the debate, so there's 3 or 4 points. Just to clarify, it is acceptable, whether or not we have gypsy traveller and travelling show people planning, it is acceptable and we do expect the proposals will also come in the same way as this one. So once the plan's made, that won't mean any other applications coming forward are automatically excluded. It's acceptable here and elsewhere that site applications will come forward on approved identified sites and otherwise through the planning process. So I just wanted to clarify that to the members. Also, Keith Fairfield's objections to Greenfields in Kettering Borough do not mean this is unsustainable. It may be nearby, but there are very different situations going on that site. Greenfields is due to be cleared and is subject to enforcement action at the moment. And one other point we need to capture some of the other comments is that many families in this catchment area, including farmers and other travellers, will be facing the same sustainability issues that have been discussed by councillors to get to schools and facilities. So I think it has to be taken in that context. And if I could just clarify with Councillor Owen Swift, your proposal for refusal, you suggested the same reasons as before, except not overdevelopment, or did you want some advice?
Well, I was seeking advice from officer. If you think, if it's an appeal, what would be the best ground for you to defend the appeal?
Come back to that. Through you, Chairman, thank you. I think first and foremost, the starting point is the policy of the local Western Paths Joint Forward Strategy. And previously, the application was refused for a number of reasons. One, that would be visually intrusive as a result of overdevelopment of the site, secondly, that would be unsustainable. So members need to look very clearly at those reasons for refusal, be careful not to add to those reasons for refusal. Clearly, in this particular application, there is a significant reduction in the number of units, and there's officers who do not feel we could support or sustain a reasonable refusal related to the overdevelopment of the site on this particular occasion. But that's your advice.
So basically, what you would like me to propose is the sustainability aspect. So we have the same reason that previously, except the overdevelopment of the site.
I want to come back to that, Chair, through you, Chairman. We've just clarified the issue regarding the overdevelopment. That's the question that was asked. In regards to the sustainability, in terms of the site, it is very different from the Greenfield site. That's an authorised site. This is an established and authorised site. In terms of the character and the context in which enforcement action is now being taken over the Greenfield site, in terms of its surrounding environment, there's a very long path. It is very open, the Greenfield site, whereas this site is very shielded, is well screened from the surrounding landscape. To come back to the sustainability issue, as officers, we feel that this is not any more sustainable or any less sustainable than any of those issues which are being experienced by many parishes and many villages within our district. Consequently, officers' advice is that we don't feel that we can sustain that reason for refusal. Members are entitled to reach different view.
May I come back to you? In 2012, you had 2 appeals on Greenfield side, and it wasn't about the visual impact. It was the planning inspectorate refused permission, just a low temporary permission, because of the unfairness of saying that it was not the right place to put a gypsy traveller site or pitches on that site. If you read the planning inspectorate, it's quite clear that the sustainability, it was unfair on the gypsy, it was catering was allowed to keep the site due to their lack of policy. So basically, I question if the inspector, if that site will go in front of planning, in front of the planning inspectorate, will not have the same view from the site on Golden Gate or Greenfield, because the inspector clearly said that the site in Greenfield was not sustainable, and it was only because of the lack of policy of Kettering Borough Council that it gave a temporary planning application. So, and that was in 2012. In 2009, when Mr. Macan put the planning application, we were in another regime. I come back to the new regime. Now we are in a regime in NPPF 2012. In 2009, we were not in the same regime. And Kettering, the lack of policy put Kettering in that position. We are 2 years behind Kettering, because Kettering now have worked very, very hard to provide pitches, and we are going to do so. So we should. What I find is that we are not learning from our neighborhood authority. The Office of Neighborhood Authority, Kettering, have worked extremely hard to provide the pitches, and the only they have opposed, and you have read their report. So I think the argument of the officer at KBC should also be valid across the street. I'm sorry, I cannot see what is the difference, except that in 2009 we were in another regime.
I think we've got your point.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And I think it's probably unfair. I know the point you're making. You're saying it's not overdeveloped this time, but it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
But I think it's probably unfair to ask the officer if she thinks that when they recommended the opposite way around. So, and then it puts them in an awkward position as well.
I just wanted to make sure that if it's on appeal, the officer, if the committee is minded to accept my proposal to vote, I wanted the officer to feel comfortable with what is put in front of her.
I think what you have to bear in mind is you're not just over the road, you're into a different authority with a different policy regime and a different position. You all know, because you're all trained to know this, you consider each application on its own merits. So that doesn't just mean, well, how far away is it? It means you consider it entirely on its own merits. So a Kettering application must be considered on the basis of Kettering policy in its location within the borough of Kettering, in the same way as this application has to be considered on its merits within the district of Daventry. And therefore the planning officers have done exactly that. And while you may have the inspector's decision in relation to a Kettering matter over the road in 2012, that has had to be considered on the basis of the policies and the context within Kettering, not within Daventry. So while I'm not saying it's entirely erroneous, it has some relevance, you must qualify that by that approach, and therefore the officers have done exactly that and have considered in relation to Daventry and have applied the sustainability test appropriately for Daventry.
Okay, I've got two more speakers indicating they want to speak, and then I think we want, unless anybody's desperate, Councillor Chandler's obviously desperate, and then we're going to go to the vote, because I think we've had a pretty fair debate. Right, Councillor Olsen.
Thank you, Chair. I've been listening to this argument quite carefully, and one of the interesting points that, if I heard it correctly, was that there have been no complaints about the existing travellers on this site since 2009. Now, surely that has to have some influence on councillors. I would like to ask them to take that into consideration when they vote. The fact is, and we all know this, there's a lot of opposition to gypsy sites no matter where they are. And I feel that if one has experience of one, as we have here, then surely the experiences we've had have to be taken into consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Paul, a quick one.
Yeah, reiterate the no complaints and also legal advice regarding catering. I come back again with total empathy for the people in and around. However, I can see no justification not to go along with officer advice. It has been extremely difficult, and I can't say any more than that.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. That was a good one. Thank you. Councillor Chandler.
Very briefly, Chairman, thank you very much for allowing me to speak again. About the sustainability, which seems to be the argument being used for refusal. This site and this community on this site is no less sustainable than any of the 8 parishes which I represent.
Thank you, Councillor Chandler. Right, unless anybody's very seriously, desperately want to say something else, I think we'll go to a vote. We've got a proposal, the application be refused because of sustainability, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. 1, 2. Those against? No, the application, that particular proposal is lost. Are we going to go the other way around? Right, so I need a proposal that the application be approved. Councillor Aiden, Councillor Osborne, thank you, Councillor Osborne. Right, all those in favour of the application being approved, please show. Those against? The application is approved.
Can you record mine?
I think it's after hearing lots of people say different things about what's happening, and we don't have a travellers policy, and yet we've been looking for one for years. I think it might be an idea for this committee to pass on to either strategy group or full council that it needs it as urgent as possible. Do you all feel that way?
I have asked that for 3 years.
Okay. So, right, if you mind, if there's anybody from that area of the application we just discussed, if you'd like to leave, we'll break
the bedroom
Might be worse. I had some comfort.
Learn to start with.
Sorry for the long way there. You're looking at it in Barbie and it's 0796. Hang on.
Thanks, Chairman. You'll see the application site lies to the south end of Barbie, opposite the primary school in the village. Barbie itself is quite a linear form of highway development with some exceptions to the west side of Daventry Road. The application is an application for outline permission for the construction of up to 12 dwellings. Basically, the application seeks permission to establish the principle of development in respect of those 12 dwellings. What's before members tonight is an illustrative drawing which shows how the site could be laid out and landscape. The application, you'll see the report sets out the policy context and also the 5-year land supply issue, in which the housing policies are now given significant weight. But there are other considerations to take into account which are material to consideration of this application, particularly in terms of how the site performs, that old word again, in sustainability terms, and in regard to the 3 different strands of economic, social, and environmental dimensions. In our view, the proposal does perform well in respect of those, and on that basis, whilst there is conflict with policy, our view is, given the scale of the development, fact that it adjoins the application site and the village itself might raise any potential harm or conflict of policy, and accordingly recommend the application be approved.
Thank you, Aaron. Right, 3 speakers. Mr. George is against the application.
Good evening. My home is adjacent to this site. However, I'm also a chartered surveyor and I've employed a chartered town planner to help with my objection this evening. We've been both very surprised by the case officer's recommendation for approval. The council's own housing land availability study confirms a 5.94 years supply. Therefore, planning law is confirmed by paragraph 11 and 12 of the NPPF states that when considering planning applications, determination must be made in accordance with the plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The word must clearly means that it is not optional, and therefore, unless there are exceptional circumstances, a contrary determination could be regarded as unlawful. The council's own planning policy officer confirms that the application is contrary to local plan and Western Plan development strategy policies, the site being in the open countryside. The officer further states that the exceptional circumstances do not exist that could allow for development outside the confines of the village, and concludes that the proposed development could not be supported. The case officer justifies his recommendation based on the provision of affordable housing to meet an identified need. However, the last survey was published in April 2002, with the actual questionnaires dated to September 2011, 3.5 years ago. As an appeal near Rugby, the inspector held that the local needs survey of more than 2 years old cannot be regarded as material consideration. Notwithstanding this, that report concluded a local need for 1 3-bedroom house and 3 2-bedroom flats. The application before the committee does not propose any flats, and a single 3-bedroom house is not a sufficient reason, on balance, to build on the open countryside, especially given the recent consent report enclosing Derby that provides 2 additional affordable units. In terms of the economic arguments, there is no evidence or case law that proves that such limited housing will have any significant impact upon shops and services in the village. It is therefore an unsubstantiated and wholly unreliable claim, and thus open to legal challenge. Derby already has housing recently approved, the number 9 dwellings in total, within the course strategy period on sustainable infill sites. A further 18 are under consideration at Manor Works in the village, which is a brownfield site. Daventry Council Officer Tom James has confirmed that the council is only 80 dwellings short of the core strategy requirement for rural areas to 2029. There is no doubt, therefore, that we are heading for a significant rural oversupply, given this rate of approvals, pending applications and appeals. Given this, the weight that can be afforded to the new homes bonus and council taxes referred to by the planning officer is very limited and not sufficient on balance to warrant building on open countryside, but also will destroy a well-preserved, important medieval ridge and furrow heritage asset, contrary to the advice of the county archaeologist. In conclusion, Derby is an unsustainable village where only minor infill development should be permitted. The proposal is neither minor or infill and would be contrary to every single relevant local policy. It cannot be sustainable, therefore, as argued by the case officer, and the adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the very limited benefits. And thus the proposal fails the test set out in the NPPF. I therefore would ask you to refuse its application.
Thank you, Mr. George. Mr. Downs, Parish Council.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to bring to your attention some of the problems that this application will cause for our village. This application is seeking permission to build 12 houses in the open countryside on the outskirts of our village. This is, however, a 5-acre site, and although 12 houses may seem reasonably modest, there is potential capacity for up to 60 houses on this land once the principal development has been established. The land is currently used for grazing and as hedge and furrow which would be lost should the area be built on. You will note from the archaeological survey that the county archaeologist feels that the current application would have an adverse impact on heritage assets, and that the loss of the ridge and furrow will have a detrimental impact on the understanding and significance of the assets within the site and the broader landscape. During these surveys, many medieval Roman remains were found, since this area was on the route from Barley Hill settlement over to Watling Street. And if houses are built here, we would lose a significant area of open countryside that is part of our local heritage and makes this corner of Northamptonshire so special to us all. The entrance to the proposed development is almost opposite the entrance to our primary school. Every morning and evening during school term time, there are at least 20 cars parked outside the school dropping off and collecting children. The transport assessment carried out for this application was carried out in August when the school was on holiday. In reality, Daventry Road is very congested and there are lots of small children in the area twice per day, which gives us huge concerns over child and traffic safety. The application is proposing a reduced vision display in line with that allowed in areas where traffic speeds are under 30 miles per hour. However, the traffic assessment did not measure vehicle speeds, so the developers have no information to tell them how fast cars travel down Daventry Road. The parish council has a speed indicator device which measures traffic speeds, and a large proportion are travelling at speeds in excess of 30 miles per hour. I urge you to refuse this application, as we would lose our open countryside, our loss of preserved ridge and furrow, and it would alter the setting of our Grade 2 listed cornmeal, which is a unique feature within the village. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. First speaker is Mr. Fred Williams, agent.
Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. The application before you this evening is for the erection of 12 dwellings in a location that adjoins and logically concludes this part of the settlement, being located opposite the existing primary school. Prior to submission of this application, the applicant has worked closely with the council's officers through a pre-application process to achieve a scheme that is relatively small in scale, respects the established pattern of development without detriment to the form and character of the existing village, retains as much of the existing established boundary vegetation as possible, including a protected oak tree along the Daventry Road frontage, will not cause harm to the amenities of neighbouring properties and raises no concerns in terms of highway safety. Even after submission, my client has worked closely with the officers in order to respond to further comments raised. In particular, we have shown how additional planting along the application site's red line boundary could be incorporated, but also how we will provide a new hedgerow along the field's wider boundaries. The development proposal is acceptable in ecological terms and from an environmental point of view. There is no objection from the landscape officer, and neighbours' concerns about the surface waterage drainage and foul water infrastructure have been shown to be unsubstantiated. Your officers are further satisfied that the development will not cause harm to the character of the village or unacceptably harm the immunity of existing residents. We acknowledge that the development will be lost in a relatively small area of ridge and furrow, but the best preserved examples are not affected by this proposal. Nevertheless, my client feels that the importance of the ridge and furrow is overstated in this instance, and clearly frustrating development will not necessarily lead to its long-term preservation. As set out in the officer's report, the development proposal performs well when assessed against the sustainable dimensions of the National Planning Policy Framework. And whilst acknowledging that there is some conflict with local policy, the scheme is now recommended for your approval by your officers and regard to the presumption in favour of sustainable development enshrined within the framework. It will deliver 12 much-needed new dwellings that will go towards the district's defined rural areas over the planned period. Moreover, these dwellings would be of an appropriate mix and type, and the future occupants would help to support existing local services and maintain the vitality of the settlement. In accordance with the Council's policy, a third of these would be affordable and meet the identified local need. My client fully understands the financial obligations associated with this development and has agreed to pay all the required monies. For all of these reasons, I implore you to resolve the grant planning permission in accordance with your officer's recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Local member, Councillor Robertson, speak first.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry.
It's all right, go ahead. I didn't see the other local member.
Oh, yes.
Who
Well,
is...
in fact, if she preferred, I'd allow her to speak first.
Okay.
They've taken the tree away.
It's all public watching. This lady, who has been our chairman for a year, usually speaks underneath an artificial tree, which is no longer there. Councillor Lomax.
Thank you very much, members. First of all, I have to say that our planning officers have a difficult and unenviable task. The report in your papers confused me, so I analysed it very carefully, and there are 16 reasons quoted in the text for approval, and 23 reasons against, of which 12 refer to specific policies. So I asked the committee to refuse this application, and I'm going to give the reasons specifically why, in no particular order. First of all, this site is outside the village confines, in open countryside, contrary to policy. Mention is made of it being opposite Mitchison and school closes. However, what I want to point out to you is that these, members, are 23 affordable houses on two exception sites, sponsored by the parish council. This land, which is quoted as being fitting together with this application, is actually outside the confines of the village. And the fact that it's an exception site, two exception sites, proves that. It is ribbon development, taking homes further away from all facilities except the school. We now have a 5-year land supply with a comfortable buffer, so this is no longer a material consideration. The site contains ridge and furrow, a non-designated heritage asset, and I'm rather sorry that the pictures you were shown, the photographs you were shown, didn't have any impression of the ridge and furrow, because in fact they were taken after the trenching had been done for the archaeological survey, and therefore it wasn't evident. However, there are overhead photographs. I don't know whether, sorry, John. There are overhead photographs. I don't know whether these are available, which actually do show that these fields are ridge and furrow. These don't give the right impression at all, but nevertheless, I refer you to the NCC archaeologists' clear and robust comments on this. And I remind you too that we have recent precedents in my ward for refusing applications considered where ridge and furrow have been considered to be material considerations. This county was particularly rich in ridge and furrow for historical farming reasons, and much of it has been lost. What is left contributes to village settings and should be protected as a visible sign of our village's history and stories. This site is just beyond the 30-mile-an-hour entrance to the village from the south. Traffic is already often travelling at speed down Daventry Road. There have been concerns and complaints about speeding for all the 38 years that I have lived in Derby. Traffic volume has increased immensely and will continue to do so. Developments that are being proposed for and indeed have been passed in Daventry for Micklewell Park and Derft and also the Rugby Zoo. We expect more rat runs to develop, more traffic on the rat runs. 20 or more cars would go daily from this site, and don't think that people are going to cycle or walk. You know from your own experience that this isn't true. People won't and don't. They'll travel to the shop because time is precious. Time is precious, there's very little of it, so they get in the car and they go to the shop. We all do it. So that's more traffic in the village itself. By the way, Barbie's pub is closed. So in fact the facilities in the village are reduced from what you've seen in your papers. Finally, there's the next problem of sustainability, which is a reasonable word, isn't it? Even social interaction between residents on this site is not guaranteed, given the indicative layout, nor is integration within the village. There may be a peripheral economic benefit, but no more than that. Lastly, I want to endorse the comments made about drainage and sewerage. It's an ongoing problem in parts of the village already, and it's not solved in all the years that I've lived there. Flooding and seepage of sewage, whatever the statutory consultees say about it, are a major concern. These houses will be at the highest point of the village. Water and sewage is going to go downhill from there, through inadequate pipes and drains. The infrastructure is insufficient. Members, please listen to local people, with whom, incidentally, the applicant has not seen fit to consult, and refuse this application. The whole village is mindful that 2/3 of this site would remain to be developed. Your decision is on the issues of principle and access on this occasion, but reserved matters can change so much of what you've seen and heard tonight, so please consider carefully the suggested and any requested conditions. I want to end by reading to you, and I think it comes from planning policy, is it, Amy? The 5th of May, local strategy,
I'll tell you when you've read it.
local strategy policy.
That's fine.
It's 6 pages, which concludes as follows. However, on balance, due to the conflict with the development plan, it is not considered that the proposed development should in principle be supported. I don't think you have that report, but please follow that advice and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lomax. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lomax has said a great deal about this, and of course she knows a lot about it because she actually lives in the village. I'm the elected representative also for this ward, and the village have not actually spoken to me at all. That's hardly surprising because I don't think my email works yet. Slightly beside the point. The point I'd like to make is that archaeology is very important, and in this ridge and furrow business, particularly when Roman remains have been found, is very important. And I think it lacks sustainability on that basis alone. And for that reason, I would urge councillors to vote against this application.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
I would just like to, are you making that as a proposition, Councillor?
No, I'm just urging you to do so.
Oh, okay. Well, I would like to make a proposition, and it's mainly, I won't go over everything that's been said, but the one thing that does get me is a ridge and furrow. We live in Long Buckby, and in Long Buckby we're lucky to have ridge and furrow, and it's beautiful. It's lovely to look at. I love walking across there, and I love explaining to people that maybe friends or visitors that come to the area that don't know about it, and explain it, and it's amazing, and I'm proud of it, which I'm sure people in Barbie are too. I can't believe, I mean, looking at them pictures there, if that is supposed to be, you know, after the ridge and furrow, whether it's found archaeologically things there or not, historical things there in the past, it makes no difference. It's ridge and furrow, it should be retained. I would like to make a proposition that this is refused on lots of grounds actually, but let me think. I had it all bit now, I don't know where I put it. I'll come back, Chairman, but I'll find my piece of paper.
Okay, well indicate when you have your piece of paper.
Yeah, will do. Thank you.
I'll get you again. Councillor Swift next.
Seconded as the chair.
Well, she hasn't made the proposition yet.
Well, she hasn't made a proposition, so I can't ask for a seconder. Yeah. The seconder has got to know what she's saying. So.
We have our, if I understand correctly, we have our 5-year start, and listening to Councillor Lomax, it is really demonstrably outside of the confines of the village. We have no. Could I have clarification from the officer that, because Councillor Lomax said that the building outside below the red line, those are seats of exception, as we know, seats of exception are allowed because they are seats of exception, and it's not a normal, well, into layman term, it doesn't fall in the same categories that a normal development. So, are we sure we are absolutely outside of the confines of the village?
Yeah, I'll answer in 2 seconds. Eamon, is it in or out?
Well, as the report says, yes, it's outside the confines of the village. There's no dispute about that.
Okay. Right.
Thank you so much.
You finished. Councillor Patchett.
Right, well, I'll have a go at proposing refusal, if you don't mind, Chairman. It's very lovely.
Thank you, Councillor Paul.
It's clearly outside of the confines of the village, as you could see. In the report it says that it is contrary to H2 of the Joint Core Strategy. It's also contrary to NPPF in HS22 and HS24. So I perhaps put those forward as being on the paragraph 135 of the NPPF with regards to the heritage asset and region furrow.
I'll second that if you don't mind sharing this is my
Go on then.
Yes, it's yeah, I know. Okay, Councillor Robinson will second it. Thank you, Councillor Osborne. I know you were there.
Yeah. No, doesn't matter. It's long. Yeah.
Right. Right. Anybody else wish to speak? Yes, there are two people. Councillor Chandler and Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to make a few comments on one or two of the things that have been said. As regards the affordable housing not being needed in Barbie, there are other needs for affordable housing in the district, so affordable housing anywhere in the district helps to fulfil a known need. As to, we're nearly at the rural development numbers in the core strategy. We're approaching rural oversupply. I'm afraid that probably won't carry a great deal of weight because these are minima in the policies, they are not limits. So be wary of using that argument. I should have perhaps said that I do know this area very well. I used to live a few doors away from where this site is, but that was 50 years ago, and I guess things have changed a bit since then. I was very distressed to learn that the Arnold Arms is no longer trading as a public house. I spent many happy hours in there. The fears about what might happen elsewhere within the curtilage of land which is owned by the applicant or under the control of the applicant cannot influence your decision tonight, I'm afraid. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that the heritage. It's clear there is a heritage asset undesignated currently in the Ridge Furrow, but I think it's also clear, if you know the site, that the bit that would be lost is not the best bit of the Ridge Furrow there. It is, in terms used in the NPPF, less than substantial harm, which means that it cannot on its own block the planning permission. That's all I wanted to say, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Carr next.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst we've just listened to the application before, I know we've got to take each application on its own merits, but surely you cannot use planning law for refusal on a previous application, then totally dismiss it on the next application. There's as many as 12 planning reasons for refusal, I gather, for this application. One of those, another speeding of the traffic has been mentioned. I'm sorry to say that's not planning. So we'll bear in mind really what you're saying. But Chair, yeah, I would only go along and refuse this application on planning grounds.
Thank you. I think Eamon would like to say a few words on what's been said.
I mean, for those members of the planning committee a while, you'll come across the term planning balance, and that's what we're at in terms of this report. This report acknowledges the loss of Ridge Borough. It doesn't shy away from it. But it also acknowledges the existence of other material considerations, such as the natural, the MPPL, etc. And weighing all of those in the balance, officers have come to the recommendation for you. Councillor Lomax referred to the local strategy comments and indicated or suggested it wasn't actually included in the report. It is actually on page 9 where it's summarised. Second paragraph in, quite clearly the advice of the local strategy service is set out in the report. The report acknowledges this is a finely balanced issue, and on that basis, being finely balanced, officers are there on the side of presumption in favour of development. Members are perfectly entitled come to a counter review of that. The advice is that you must clearly set out the reasons for coming to that counter review. I should point out, you've heard many comments about highways matters and drainage, etc. There are no objections, technical objections from the statutory consultees. So if those are going to be used for reasons for refusal, then clearly those reasons need to be substantiated by the council in order to support its reason for refusal. Turning to the more subjective issues, I mean, we've been setting that aside. There's no argument this site lies outside the confines of the village. That is accepted on both sides. So, given the 5-year land supply is a good thing, you can rely on your housing policies to substantiate your reasons for refusal, but we must be clear about what those reasons are. Simply to say it's outside the confines of the village, I would suggest you need to go further in demonstrating what is the harm. Certainly loss of an undesignated heritage asset is one, and certainly you can make reference to that. I haven't yet heard the proposition by Councillor Osborne, but the proposition by Councillor Patchett makes no reference of Joint Core Strategy Policy BM5, which relates to historic landscapes and the designated heritage assets. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you refer to H2?
That's correct.
Which is affordable housing, but has not made any reference to policy R1 or R2, which deals with housing development in rural areas. And that sets out some quite clear criteria to be met in order to make those policies acceptable. I take the points in respect of, say, policies HS22 and HS24, and it's legitimate to refer to those on the basis that it demonstrates that they're outside the confines of the village and the countryside. And also the reference to the NPPF, where less than substantial harm to undesignated heritage assets needs to be weighed in the balance. And as I say, members are perfectly entitled to come to a view on that balance and suggest that the discussions that have taken place, that the benefits do not outweigh the less than substantial harm to those undesignated heritage assets.
Thank you, Eamon. Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I be reminded if Barbie has a local plan? You know, the problem with is it in, is it out, comes up time and time again, and I only wish sometimes that we could get a definitive time around a village as to whether it's within the confines or it's out the confines. I mean, I know the area, I know the school. Arguments about speeding and all the rest of it are not planning reasons, as my colleagues already said. The Ridgeon Furrow, could you be quiet?
You finished now, Councillor. Sorry, that's great.
Yeah, the Ridgeon Furrow, yes, I like it too, but this is not one of the best examples in the near vicinity. Roman remains may have found, but Fizz site across the site would prove whether there are any substantial Roman remains. And so I come back to, is it within or without? Now, our officers are saying it's outside of the confines of the village. I personally don't feel that is a good enough reason for rejection, so I'm happy to go with afterwards as well.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. I think we've had a good enough debate now. We've got a proposal for the application to be refused for the given reasons. This has been seconded. All those in favour, please show.
Before you go, it's probably advisable to add the things that the planning office, the additional policies that the planning officer has suggested. Okay. As in BN5,
policy BN5 relates to historic landscapes again, with members feel that the the loss of the Virgin Pearl as a historic
Which needs a
fantastic.
I still want to
There's
say.
conflict with that policy. Policy R1, I think it is.
It's R1 and S1, isn't it?
Just checking that.
Yeah.
Policies R1 dealing with residential development in rural areas will be required to provide appropriate mix. Not affect open land, which is of particularly significant reform character of the village. Preserve historic buildings and areas of historic importance, etc., etc. The list goes on. So again, it's for members to identify that as a policy that we feel is conflicted. What was the other policy? Yes.
S1, I think.
So,
S1.
well, S1's a distribution of development, so that, yeah, I mean, that sets out the overall framework.
So can I ask Chair, what is a JCS?
So are you happy to include the ones the officers
That would be
okay, you're happy second?
I am.
Right, all those in favour of that proposal, please show. Those against? 5, isn't it? Put your hands up again, can you? Councillor Barrett's up at that. It's 5. 6-5. The application is refused for the given reasons. The next application is in Church of Chapel Brampton 0013.
Dwelling itself would be of appropriate size, scale, and design to the village itself. However, it's considered the proposal will not add any mix of dwellings within the village, and it's while it's accepted that the site itself is not part of a village design statement or any other public document which identifies the site in the supporting open space. You'll see from the report that advice from your conservation officers is that this private open space, when viewed from the north, just provide a clear separation between the distinct parts of the conservation area. That is, the traditional historic listed buildings from the mid-19th century and the award-winning 20th century cedar high estate. The proposal would result in the loss of the level of separation, which is considered to be an important part of this part of the conservation area. Development itself would result in less substantial harm to the setting of the heritage assets. Nonetheless, it will cause some harm, and the NPPF advises that where harm is identified, this should be weighed against the public benefits. The report then goes on to advise that there are limited public benefits, certainly none that would be deemed to outweigh the harm identified. With regard to these considerations, Chairman, the officer recommending the application be refused. However, in the reason for refusal, we do wish to make an amendment, and that amendment involves omitting a special landscape area from the reason for refusal, and to insert from line 6 in the bottom of the reason for refusal, to insert after building to the west, either conserving or enhancing the character of this part of the conservation area. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We have two speakers. Mr. Johnson is against the application.
Yes, I speak, councillors and the chairman, as the next door neighbour applicants from some 25 years. And really to reiterate the sort of concerns that were raised with the officers at the when the application was originally lodged. The proposed development, I believe, remains totally inappropriate because of its mixed styles and the different building materials, i.e. stone and brick, and it's out of proportion, I still believe, for the site and the setting and for the list of cottages which are on Welford Road. It would affect our view of the from our garden because it'll be overlooked by a brick garage built to cater for the occupants of the new property who will access from the main road. And for these reasons, I object to the scheme and simply respectfully ask that the councillors confirm the recommendation of your planning officer for refusal.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Ozzy at the end.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure whether at the beginning you said don't stand, but as everybody is.
You can stand if you want to, you can sit.
Well, hopefully more cuddly than intimidating. The development proposal before you is not a speculative scheme, but will provide a new home for the applicants, freeing up the existing property in Cedar Hive. In some way, then, a local need. It is acknowledged by your officers in our discussions and in the report and tonight that the development which is now proposed has vastly improved the design over the previous scheme. It would deliver a high-quality home in a sustainable location, and it is within the confines of the village. Access also has now found to be acceptable. The main issue then is the interpretation of the impact on the form and character of this part of the village. As a high-quality scheme, well designed in its traditional style, I consider it is an enhancement to this part of Chapel Brampton. I say this because the proposed dwelling will relate well to number 1 Welford Road, adjacent to which is the access to the new dwelling via an existing entrance and gateway. The space between number 1 Welford Road and 9 Cedar Hive is already blurred, with glimpses of both styles of development through hedges and substantial trees, particularly at this time of the year. Views from public vantage points are very limited. There are no wider views into the village. The new property will be partially hidden, but nevertheless appear still related to number 1 Welford Road. The space behind number 1 Welford Road is also impacted upon by a variety of what I'll call bits and pieces associated with the houses fronting Welford Road. The access off Welford Road, parking of cars and other vehicles, large sheds, summer house in the garden fencing, and at the moment I think a caravan. Also the change in levels are significant between this site and the land on Cedar Hive. Again, it doesn't form an important open space. It is not as visible as it's been shown. The setting of the listed building is already influenced by these elements, and the new dwelling, well designed in a similar traditional style to number 1 Welford Road, will not harm the area, but improve the appearance and enhance the character. In my view, it's a positive change to a development within the confines of the village, and it represents sustainable development. Respectively, I disagree with your officer and hope you're able to support the proposal. However, if there's still some uncertainty, I'd appreciate consideration being given to deferring a decision and actually making a site visit, something that the Conservation Officer did not, where you were able to identify the different arguments. In response to the inspector, and with respect to his views, it's not a mixed style, it's a traditional style, and very much aligned to the listed buildings. It doesn't affect his views. Again, if you'd see on the site visit, due to the boundary treatment and the change in levels, you would not be able to see the proposed house. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Local member, Councillor Patron.
Thank you, Chair. Many of you will be familiar with the aspect of number 1 Welford Road. I'm sure you've been stuck in traffic jams recently with the traffic lights there. More of you will be unfamiliar with Cedar Hyde, which is behind it, which is characterised by, I would call it almost an American style, because they're all very open plan and very large plots indeed. Having had to deliver leaflets around there, I can tell you quite how far it is. The new proposed building is actually in the conservation area, and to my mind is I hesitate to use the word, but a pastiche of number 1, and I think in its current style does detract from what is an interesting row of listed buildings. It does form an important edge to the village, because everybody coming from the north, south down Welford Road, that is the first edge of the village that you meet. So I'm happy to propose that we go along with officers' advice. Yes, to accept officers' advice.
Sorry, I was actually talking at the time. I do apologise.
Can I just clarify for the benefit of members that that's the conservation officer, that's the landscape officer during their site visit, and the case officer also listed.
You're proposing refusal?
Accepting officers' advice, correct.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Osborne, do you wish to speak now?
No.
No, okay. Right, anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Swift.
Yes, I note with the parish council didn't object. So why is that in front of us? Because it seems that we have no objection. So I can't understand why it's in front of our planning committee.
Just because the parish council doesn't object to something, it doesn't mean to say it need come to committee. The parish, this committee judges the application, not the parish council.
Yes.
But the officers considers it wrong.
Applications can be referred to the officers. The senior delegation allows officers to decide.
Yes.
To put them into committee.
But I thought
it's relevant. So I think that's one of these cases.
Yes, but I thought it would have been delegated. It's for that I'm surprised to see it in front of us. But that's all.
The reason it's here is because if the parish council had said the same as what the officers said, it would have been a delegated refusal. But the parish council support the application. Well, they're not against it. That's why it's to committee, I believe. Correct?
Yes, Chair, I read that as one side of supporting the application. There's no objection to asking the dwelling to be lower. So it's implicit that they're all supportive of the application. Whereas if it was simply no objections without any qualifying statement, then yes, it could have been delegated. But I would say that qualifies it to clear on the side of saying.
Sorry, I just wanted a clarification because I wasn't very clear. Thank you so much.
Right, we have a proposal that's been seconded that the application be refused as per officers' recommendations. All those in favour, please show. Those against? 1, 2, 3. The application is refused. The next application is Broadstone 0072.
Thanks, Chairman. The application site, again, just in case you don't know, clearly lies outside the confines of the village of Braunston. The area that sees to the north is Braunston Marina, which, although comprising a lot of buildings, residential and commercial uses, is actually a settlement. That said, the buildings sit either side of the A45, which is the main street of Daventry. Can you just go to... You see the Parish Council has objected to the application. The application is a full application for 2 dwellings on a roughly triangular plot that sits in the area between the A45 and Royal Road. As the report sets out, there is clear conflict with planning policy as the starting point for determining applications, and I think there are other material considerations that are relevant to this proposal that, in my view, weigh in favour of it. Namely, 2 recent decisions by this council to approve single dwellings that effectively enclose the site, one to the right-hand side and one to the bottom side of the drawings before you. The effect of that is effectively to further compound the amount of development in that area, and one then has to consider the harm of further development as currently proposed under this application. The proposal uses the existing site levels. Proposed dwellings are not of local vernacular. They are modern design, flat roof design. We'll put those elevations up in a moment. But in my view, the proposal in terms of the principle of development, having regard to those material considerations, i.e. recent decisions, is that whilst there is conflict with development plan policy, on the face of it, in principle, the proposal can be supported on the grounds that it doesn't adversely impact on communities of adjoining residential properties, nor does it impact adversely on any open land of significance to the former charge of the village. And accordingly, we are recommending the application be approved. Just before we go to the elevations, design is a subjective judgment, but the advice in the NPPF is that authorities shouldn't seek to stifle or prevent innovative design, and only design that is pure of a very poor quality should be refused. There will be different views about the elevations before them, but the designs and layout has really responded to the site levels across the site in terms of trying to split the levels, but also using materials that are modern composite materials and traditional materials of stone and timber, etc. But they are what they are, and obviously members will clearly take a view of that. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Aaron. No local members, though? No. Right, Councillor. Councillor Frenchman, followed by Councillor Paul.
Can I just confirm with officers, the 2 houses that we gave planning permission for that you mentioned, were they were of a special design or build that was it low carbon?
Yeah. I think the reasons put in the committee minutes suggested they were low carbon. That's what's being put forward here.
And that's what I was just going to. So these are of a similar standard.
Yeah, they've used that as a basis for justifying.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the design. I mean, I look at it. I think there are times when design can be beautiful. The site that it's on is not detrimental to the village or any other buildings surrounding the area. So I'm happy to go on what officers advise.
That's a proposal.
It is a proposal.
Thank you for those second. Loads on. Councillor Tashley, I think it's first. Right, if nobody else wishes to speak, those in favour of that proposal to approve the application, please show. Those against? Right. Okay. The application is approved. Next application is 0114 and is in Daventry.
Chairman, the application site comprises quite a large residential property. It's been converted, extended in the past, comprising a large single dwelling with granny annex extending to the south, and a number of outbuildings standing in, as you can see, quite an extensive plot. This is part of Badby Road, Starburton Road, basically connects Starburton to Badby. Is characterised by a number of dwellings, commercial properties in splendid isolation, but nevertheless quite distinctive sort of groups of dwellings listed across that particular road. The whole site lies in a special landscape area, as designated under policy BM1. The application is an application which is now retrospective for change of use of the buildings to provide effectively a pretty lifestyle group camp facility whereby residential courses will be conducted on site with a mixture of outside exercises, internal sort of sessions, and also sessions away from the site in other parts of the world or other parts of the country. The applicant states that the sessions will run between 4 and 7 days, up to a maximum of 15 people coming to the site, and that activities outside will be strictly controlled by the existing staff, etc. As I mentioned, this is a part retrospective proposal that you'll see from the presentations that the experience alleges noise and nuisance as a result of those activities, and the concerns is that they do detract the amenities of the adjoining residential properties. The application should be supported. In development plan policy terms, there is general support for diversification and increased support for development of businesses in the rural area, the rural economy. But clearly that must be at an appropriate scale, appropriate to its location. In officers' views, the proposals have been carefully assessed and judged to be appropriate, subject to the conditions set out in the report, which seek to control any outside activities to the eastern side of the site, so as to minimise any potential impact on adjoining residential properties to the west. You've heard much about noise, etc., and I should stress that whilst it is capable of being a material consideration to the determination of planning applications, amongst other things in the planning balance, officers have used that on balance the proposal is acceptable having regard to the consultation replies from our own environmental health officers, the Highway Authority, and the officers' assessment on site. That said, there are other regimes that exist for the control of any antisocial noise, statutory noise, nuisance, etc., under the environmental health regulations, which are not fettered by any decision in respect of this particular application. And with that, Chairman, officers have decided that the application should be approved. But happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Alan. We have 4 speakers listed, but there is no speaker from Daventry Parish Council, so there are only 3 speakers. First of all, Dr. Davis, who's against the application.
Thank you. Firstly, could I point out that the map you put up is incorrect. I did bring this to the attention of the planning committee, but they seem to put up the incorrect boundaries. Anyway, thank you, committee, for allowing me to speak. I'm Dr. Tom Davis of the White House, Badby Lodge, and I live adjacent to Badby Lodge Farm, where the applicant is the tenant. I purchased my home 8 years ago to live in this idyllic setting within a special landscape area. However, since Hybrid Boot Camp began operation in the earlier part of this year, we have been unable to open our doors and windows without being subjected to intrusively loud music and military-style shouting. This occurs any time between 7 AM and 5 PM, including bank holidays. On the Hybrid Boot Camp website video, they state that the start time of the day of activities commences from 6:30 AM. In addition, the boot camp has occurred on 32 out of 37 consecutive days. The environmental health officer notes state that the outdoor activities do not start until after about 9 AM and will take place on the side of the gardens beyond the east wall of the property, and that afternoon activities will be off-site. This is not the case. The applicant has a business plan in place stating that the outdoor activity will only take place in the mornings, but our experience of this boot camp is very different. For instance, during the recent bank holiday weekend, noisy afternoon activities took place, as witnessed by the rural community police officer, who could clearly hear the noise within our kitchen on the afternoon of Sunday the 3rd of May. This activity took place on the gravel driveway within 100 metres of our kitchen. The applicant states that he does not shout, yet on his own website one of the frequently asked questions is, will they shout and scream at me? His answer begins, if they need to. Our experience is that this boot camp is very much of the military style, despite the applicant's claims otherwise, as evidenced on the hybrid boot camp website, where it may be seen that the trainers are all ex-military, and in both video clips that I understand the committee has seen. I now refer to the aerial photograph that shows the close proximity of our garden, in which we used to enjoy peace and tranquility, regularly making use of our summer house and spending a lot of time outside, as we're keen gardeners and utilising our work studio. As is clearly seen on the photograph, there is only a short distance between our property and where the boot camp's activities are being run, contrary to the applicant's statement to the Environmental Health Officer that all activities would be beyond the east wall of the property. We've requested meetings with the applicant on the 26th of January, 9th of March, 10th and 24th of April to discuss the noise and disturbance, as it was our wish to resolve the problem. However, he has not availed himself of this opportunity. On the 10th of April, the noise was loud enough to be heard in our kitchen with the windows and doors closed. I spoke with the applicant, who agreed that the noise was too loud. However, the volume was not reduced during that session. The intrusively loud music and shouting has been of such impact as to negatively affect the way in which we may enjoy our property, leaving us stressed, anxious, and to be honest, feeling like this is our worst nightmare. And this is with only 6 to 8 people on the course. The noise will be so much worse with the 15 that the applicant has planned for. After discussion on Monday with the Environmental Health Officer, who has now seen the website and video clips, he is going to investigate the matter, as in his opinion the noise was excessive. I am sceptical that a transient fad like this boot camp can be described as sustainable development. We therefore ask the committee to refuse this application. However, should the plan be approved, I ask that clear and concise conditions are put in place to address my concerns, protect my rights, and in the hope that the arbitrary interference with our privacy and enjoyment of our own home is brought to an end and a positive neighbourly relationship achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Richards from Daventry Parish Council.
Thank you, everyone. Daventry Parish Council has opposed this change of use for the following reasons. The application states change of use from dwelling C3 to D1, non-residential institutions for health and fitness education with some overnight stays. The applicant's submitted details states his intention to hold up to 30 7-day courses and 15 4-day courses per year. That amounts to 39 weeks a year of residential courses with up to 20 people, including trainers, in residence. We cannot see how you can describe this proposal as non-residential institution with some overnight stays, being 39 weeks out of a year. This special landscape location is primarily a rural agricultural area with a few residential properties dotted along this Daventry Lane, with the closest being only 50 metres from this site where most of the proposed activities take place. Daventry Parish Council contend that this location is unsuitable for such boot camp activity, as recently held events have demonstrated, with unacceptable noise levels being experienced by local residents, as we've already heard. Daventry District Council's local development plan states that planning permission needs to meet the following requirements. GN1A, safeguard the natural resources of the district. GN1B, protect and enhance the environment. GN1F, severely restrain development in the open countryside. GN2A is of a tight scale and design in keeping with the locality and does not detract from its amenities. GN2C, 15 to 20 vehicles coming and going from this property on a daily basis will have an adverse impact on this rural Staverton Lane. Daventry Parish Council contends that this proposal is contrary to and undermines these requirements. Having visited the property, we also have some concerns whether the living amenities and waste disposal means via a septic tank can adequately provide up to 20 persons over 39 weeks. Apparently, since this application was submitted, there has been boot camp activities held on this site on 32 days out of a 37 consecutive day period, with military-style activities held outdoors, led by ex-military trainers. Considerable noise disturbance has been experienced by the neighbours. And I have to say that I am disappointed to learn that no planning officer from DDC have been out to the site during these exercises to assess the operation and evaluate the effect on the rural community and residents. Finally, by granting permission for this change of use, you are providing license for this military-style activity to operate in this rural residential area, which will hold no controls or limits on possible future extension of such activities, which are likely to cause even more disturbance and distress to local residents. For these reasons, Daventry Parish Council contends that this application is unsuitable for such proposed activities. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, who's for the application?
Good evening. I'm not Mr. Andrew. He's not present due to currently filming with the BBC. An innovative show hosted by Freddie Flintoff entitled Special Forces, the Ultimate Challenge. He has asked me to read this statement in full in support of his application and business at Badby Lodge Farm. As a member of the Special Armed Forces, the hybrid fitness business was a natural progression to follow, and a business was set up to support all that would benefit and want to develop from personal training and develop a better lifestyle. Personally, I've invested approximately £100,000 into the business thus far. I currently employ 3, subcontract around 9. Employed are a chef, house and groundkeeper, and a business manager. Subcontracted are other fitness trainers, psychologists, gardeners, builders, beauty therapists, massage therapists, Indian cuisine chefs, and general maintenance. These employees, stroke subcontractors, will be out of work if plans are not approved. I am more than happy to work with the neighbours within reason to remain amicable and respectful of noise. For example, move Zumba away to the east of the main dwelling, or other potential noisy activities to a more remote location. Currently, we source all food and utilise local facilities, which in turn generates income for the local businesses. I will most definitely appeal any decision that doesn't allow suitable practice of my business. Facts for all to be aware of. We didn't take part in any boot camp activities until approximately 11 weeks after we submitted any plans. The first boot camp was on the 28th of March. We ran a trial boot camp on the 17th of January to assess how things would work and attain marketing material. Boot camp activities completed to date are 28th of March, 4th of April, 18th of April, 25th of April, 16th of May. The total number of days where a boot camp activity has taken place is 28 days up to the 16th of May boot camp, which is the current one planned. So, since the December the 1st, when I moved into it, and that's 4 weeks out of a possible 27 thus far. Weekend boot camp we have on the 1st of May to the 4th of May. All activities involving noise are held between 0900 hours to 10:30 and again at 11 till 12:30 only. The rest of the afternoon is off-site using local amenities and facilities. Note again, we are generating revenue for the local business. The boundary between myself and the closest neighbours, Tom and Colin, who I know are objecting, is surrounded by trees and buildings. They cannot see anything unless they're right up close to the fence, but appreciate they would hear noise. The septic tank has never been an issue, even when hosting parties from the owner, original owner, of around 70 people, and it is and does ever become an issue, I would pay to have the tank emptied or maintained periodically. Car parking isn't an issue, as per the enforcement officer's statement. Food standards agencies have given us a 5-star rating. Responses to any concerns neighbours have or suggest, as previously brought up and mentioned, is the use of headsets, which we deem unacceptable.
Could you wind up, please?
Sorry?
could you wind up?
Yeah, last statement. Which do not break any environmental sound issues. We would also move any noisy activities away from the main dwelling, and would any other activities where noise is an issue. I would urge you to go with the planning recommendation for approval. Again, as mentioned, I would look to appeal any decision not in my favour as no development has taken place up to the building, and all activities are within, as I understand, and have been advised, normal parameters, practices for physical
Finish now, please. I'll give you enough time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, local members. I think Councillor Guildford first.
Yes, if you don't mind, Chair, I'll just come round to the eyes off what we
We can see you.
I can't. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak, and thank you for permitting. I'm speaking here on behalf of the local voice. I realise I'm elected to represent everybody, but the local voice is telling me they're against the application. Whilst I admire the efforts of the applicant to try and build up a business in a rural area, I have asked myself the question, would I like the residential property next to my property to become a commercial concern operating 24/7 as an open air being the appropriate words, thank you very much, and the answer would have to be no. I myself have been to an open air gym, may not look like it, but we also have an open air assault course in our country park, and there is a boot camp about to open in Staverton Park. These are all recreational sites and are not neighbouring a residential property. In the summary of the application, it states some overnight stays, implying a small amount. I won't repeat what's been said earlier, but I think we've determined it's more than some. And yes, I hear what the applicant says about events held to date, but the business plan shows you the events for the future. The impact on the neighbour's residential property will be significant. We are not talking in this application about an agricultural land building activity being diversified in order to remain sustainable. Instead, we are talking about a residential property adjacent to another residential property that wishes to become a commercial concern. A residential property that could easily remain a residential property. It is suggested, given the extensive size of the dwelling and the grounds, if conditioned appropriately, the business could be absorbed into the host land and buildings. I would not disagree with this Worritor site, an isolated farmhouse, but it is not. Badby Lane is often referred to as a ribbon development at Staverton. Amongst this ribbon development are just two other commercial activities, both of which are very low-key businesses with not much traffic. Neither are an activity that is open 7/24 continuously for, I can't remember how many weeks are in the business plan. I would therefore ask that the committee refuse the application. However, I would add that if the committee decides to proceed it, a robust management plan is put in place that can be enforced, i.e. outdoor activities are between 9:30 and 12. There is a break clause, so the 24/7 operations cannot run back to back. There is a restriction on how many bank holidays the site can operate. There's a restriction on the number of people on site, and that the west line is referred to in the proposed condition the full length of the property. Conversely though, as I read these conditions, I shudder, thinking what if it was my neighbouring property. Therefore I ask you to refuse this application on the basis it cannot be absorbed into the current site. The application is not in keeping with protecting and enhancing the environment. It does not relate to the reuse or adaptation of a rural building in connection with sustainability. It is already sustainable, and it adversely affects the character of the local landscape. We've talked about balance. The harm here is we lose the residential property and we have a noise nuisance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilbert. Councillor Patchett.
Thank you, Chairman. Now, as most of the board members, those of you who have been around a while, do know that we, as a team, support the rural economy and economic growth and businesses that are fledgling, and we like to encourage encourage along generally. If I was the applicant and I was making this application, I'd make sure that I did everything by the book and didn't upset anybody during the planning process. Now, the application was validated on the 12th of February. The applicants sought to start their classes 6 weeks after the application was validated, which, to my mind, it gives the impression that there's a lack of regard for this authority in this matter. Now, I read condition 4, and I think that it's not sufficient for this particular type of application. There are other authorities who have dealt with applications such as this, and they have worked on management plans which basically tie down all of the things that have been mentioned here tonight. One of the things that can mitigate noise is electronic headsets, which are today's technology. And I was disappointed to hear that the applicant's representative doesn't want to use those. But of course that would really not mitigate the fact that the person doing the tutorials and running the classes would still be making a lot of noise into those headsets. Now, as far as the NPPF is concerned, paragraph 123 does seek to identify and protect areas of tranquility. And also paragraph 17, which is mentioned by the officer, section 4 says always that the planning authority should always seek to secure a good standard of amenity for all existing and future occupants of land. Now, quite clearly that there are a lot of issues going on with this site, and I do have a great deal of sympathy for the neighbour who does have, or did have, a very quiet and very secluded and very private property, which is now being turned upside down by the activities of the applicant. So I think, I mean, I've been very undecided on this application, and I've looked at everything with both sides, and I have been conflicted about whether to make a proposal or not. I think, on balance of what I've heard this evening, that I would like to make a proposal to refuse the application on the grounds that it's not appropriate, the development is not appropriate for this location. It's unsustainable in that everywhere you go you've got to drive backwards and forwards to it, and it shouldn't be supported, Chairman.
Thank you. Do you have a second? Councillor Frenchman. Would you like to speak now, Councillor Frenchman?
Not at the moment, thank you, Chair.
Right. I've got Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused because there seems to be different things being said about this. Like the gentleman that just spoke on behalf of the applicant and read out his opinion, sorry, his statement, should I say. For a start, he listed a great amount of people that he would be employing, and I was quite shocked by that in the first place. But here, on page 82 of our papers, at the bottom, this is obviously after on the background and proposal, and it says that staff-wise, I would employ one other full-time person as an admin event manager who would work on site, off-site, right? And it says we have great offices, facilities. Then during courses I would subcontract, hire any chef, housekeeper, and a part-time cleaner, pot washer, and another trainer, right? And that is all that's mentioned in this. But when that was read out then, there was a great long list of this. And obviously these people are going to be staying somewhere at the time. So when this happens, if there's the 15 people, plus all these people on site, and I mean, we all know, I don't know how many people like use Facebook or have friends that like boot camps are the in thing at the moment for every person that wants to lose weight or wants to get fit. I have several friends that do it, but again, like Councillor Guildford said, they are done in parks, and they are done in designated areas where not like this, and they are noisy because the people are how to say it, like encouraged to keep going and to keep up. So when they give up, and I can say this because I have quite a close friend that does one quite often. She does it, and then she falls behind again, and then she does it again, like a weekend one or a week one or whatever. And they're encouraged, they get shouted at to be encouraged to keep on going when they've had enough. And they're on the floor because they can't do any more. And it says in the report that it's helped obese people, and if you've got an obese person, and they are going to be trying to exercise, they might not, if they're in the other people in the party aren't obese, they're obviously not going, they might not be able to keep up. So that they will be shouted at to be encouraged. There will be, whether it's really loud, but it will be heard by the neighbours. I feel very, very, very sorry for them. And they were saying about the Zumba lessons. Zumba, everybody knows, is done to music because without it you can't keep up the rhythm for Zumba, whether it's moved or not. And if it's outdoors, the music will travel. Noise travels. Everybody knows that. This is, to be honest, when I first saw this, I didn't think I was going to have a problem with it. But when I read through it, and I've heard everything, and I've gone through it over and over again, I have got a problem with it. And I do think that this shouldn't go through. There's too many discrepancies. And I do think it'll have a big impact on their neighbours. And like Councillor Guildford said, I wouldn't want that. I really wouldn't want that. So, and that's how I always put myself forward, thinking what I would do, and I would not be happy. So I fully support the fact that I think this proposal should be refused.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Like my previous colleague, I came here with an open mind. I read the recommendation, and I didn't really have any problem with it. And I thought it would be able to be dealt with in the conditions or more conditions, etc. But I think because of the nature of the business, if you start slapping on too many conditions and hours, etc., the whole idea and principle just won't work. So I'm beginning to think conditions are not the answer. I do feel sorry if they've already employed any staff to work there. I think they'll probably jump the gun a bit and bring in expenditure. But I think this should be refused on the grounds G1, is it? GN1A, GN1B, GN2A, GN2C. I think it's totally unsuitable, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Irving-Swift.
Yes, when I read the planning application and all what they would do in this boot camp, like losing, I think I'm going to join, losing 16 pounds in 6 days. And so I look on the website and Facebook, and it was a complete a disconnection between the boot camps and the proposal of the food. The food looked like a 5-star hotel, very luxurious, that will not help you to lose weight, and certainly not something you can do in a kitchen that is not a very big and professional kitchen. And I use a facility who has a gym, and it's an hotel, and they produce food like that. They have a professional kitchen. So where I am concerned is, when I look on their Facebook, you had empty bathtub where people were sitting in bathtub. I suppose it was cold water. And it looked very amateurish. And on the other hand, you had 3-star, 4-star hotel kind of food, but all in a kind of relaxed environment. So it is a professional facility or it is amateurish, but you cannot have things like that. On the Facebook, I could not understand what they were at. But looking at that aside, when you want to open a facility like that, you are talking more like an hotel with a full planning application. And I think opening things like that without taking in consideration the neighbor and the impact on the neighbors, we could all be fearful if we have a big house next to us and they start to... The problem is we have a retrospective planning application and how we deal with that. And if it would have been absolutely super, they could have invited their neighbor to join to see how good they were. And when you start by on the wrong foot with something like that, what's next? So, but I don't know for planning reason what we can use. So I would like to listen to my colleague, but I would rather like to refuse that.
Okay, well, we've got 2 more speakers and we'll be coming back to officers to sort of talk about planning reasons. Councillor Frenchman, then Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I just noticed on page 83 there's the outline of excuse me, of how many courses would be run in a year. And on a rough calculation, that works out at courses running 250 days out of a year. So that's, in effect, 2 days out of every 3 would be a course. I can't, in all conscience, allow something like that to happen. If it was next to me, I would be going absolutely spare. It would drive me to distraction. As it is, I live next to a pub, so I know what disturbance can be like. But I work with the pub and I talk to them. It appears in this instance there appears to have been no communication between the applicant and his neighbours in any excuse me, in any meaningful way, and would make a recommendation outside of the planning process that the neighbours actually should be meeting and thrashing out some of these issues if this was to go ahead. I have to say that listening to my colleagues, my reactions were very similar, that on the face of it, it seemed not innocuous, but something that could be managed. But having listened to people and to the opinions expressed, I have to say I came down more heavily on the side of opposing it, which is why I seconded Councillor Patchett's proposal to refuse it. My only suggestion, I don't know whether it works, is whether it can be deferred while the neighbours and the applicant talk about mitigation of noise.
We've got a proposal.
But would that, perhaps not, would that have been a possible motion?
I think for you, Chairman, that would be something that is in the non-metropolitan.
Okay.
We're talking about noise per se.
Okay, through you, Chairman, yeah, every encouragement is given to applicants to talk to neighbours prior to submitting applications.
I appreciate that.
If only to inform the application, clearly we can prepare both sides of the argument. At the end of the day, there's a recommendation before you. As I always say, you have to take a different view.
Thank you, Mr. Officer.
Clearly, in doing so, obviously, you've listened to the arguments for and against. And it seems to me that members have considered the possibility of conditions who are not satisfied those conditions are enforceable or can achieve the mitigation that they want to achieve in order to obtain the immunity currently enjoyed by the neighbouring property. That's a reasonable course to go down, but clearly you need to support that by policy and by evidence, and obviously not stray into the remit of other regulations such as environmental health, etc. According to that, the impact of development on the immunity of dwelling properties is is a material consideration. So, and noise can be quite subjective.
Thank you, Aaron. One more speaker, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'm right in understanding that the gentleman who spoke for the application said that the activities on site would only be between 9 and 10:30 and 11 and 12:30 in the morning. And in the Environmental Health Officer's report, it says that the afternoon will consist of activities off-site. So there will only be those 3.5 hours when they'll actually be doing things on-site. It also says in the conditions that no exercise activities that involve playing of and or dancing to music shall take place to the west of the line of the most eastern wall of the main original building. So that means that anything that does have music, etc., will be right at the far side, away from the other houses, the White House and such like. Also, the Environmental Officer says that if there is any problem with future nuisance, it could be corrected by way of statutory nuisance and regulation under the Environmental Protection Act of 1990 or other relevant legislation. And reading those sort of things, I think that we should go along with officers' advice for this. I think there's going to be enough things in place to make sure that the neighbours aren't upset, and if they are, then the other regulations can be brought in to make sure it stops. But I think we should give it a try first.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, Maria wishes to make a couple of points.
Again, just some notes I've made during the debate, Chairman. There was mention of septic tank, that is very clear outside planning, just for the benefit of this. And I need to clarify that there isn't any environmental health objections or objections from the Environment Agency. There was talk about headsets. I can advise the committee that through environmental health, headsets and silent displays have actually been used in the district where there's been noise nuisances identified and people have been subject to statutory notices. So environmental health is effective in terms of managing that sort of noise. That condition can be applied. I'm aware that weddings have taken place in Daventry in a sensitive spot where noise abatement was absolutely managed with people wearing headsets for what's called silent disco. I thought that would that's not something everyone hears about. I'm sorry for the term. And the kitchen, it was mentioned the kitchen, probably the Councillor Smith, that is, if it's operating as a business, that is subject to environmental health, food safety inspections and that entire regime. So they would have to be satisfied that that's done properly and all of that.
Right. Are you happy, Aidan, with the reasons given for each user? Well, not happy with it, right? That's not the word. Do you understand the reasons?
I understand them. I've got sort of every empathy with concerns. Clearly, they would need to be clarified in terms of qualifying with relevant policies and advice in terms of the MPF paragraphs.
Right, you mean you want MPPF numbers for...
Well, for example, I mean, again, I don't wish to belabor the point. There has been reference to safe policies in the district local plan, GM1 and GM2. There's been no reference, as far as I can recall, to policies in the joint core strategy, which is the more up-to-date document. For example, policy R2, which is the rural economy, which talks about promoting it where businesses are on an appropriate scale for the location, respect the environmental quality and character of their area, protect the best and most versatile agricultural land, for example. And also policy S1, which deals with the distribution of development. S1D, where new development in rural areas will be limited with emphasis being on enhancing and maintaining the distinctive character and vitality of rural communities, shortening journeys, strengthening rural enterprise, and respecting the quality of tranquility. And clearly those are criteria set out in policies, qualifying those and articulating those as reasons for refusal. But there's been no reference to those, and given that it is a recently adopted part of the development plan, I would have expected regard to be had to those provisions.
Okay, well, clearly Councillor Patchett is, if those are the numbers, clearly Councillor Patchett in his proposal is saying he's against R2 and against S1. I would have thought that would be the obvious thing. Yeah, I'm not putting words in your mouth, I'm just summing up what you've said and what other people have said and what the officer has said. Okay, we have a proposal then that the application is refused for the given reason, which has been seconded. All those in agreement, please show. Those against? 3. 8-3. The application is refused. What do we do about enforcement action?
Well, Chairman, clearly enforcement is discretionary and it's about expediency as well. The applicants do have a right to appeal against this particular decision. Certainly in my experience, as a planning authority, we've given the opportunity for the appeal process to be exercised first before then considering enforcement. That said, if activities escalate and there are allegations of continuing breaches of planning control or environmental health, we, as a council, would investigate those also. But clearly, a decision has been made. The applicant has stated they'll exercise the right of appeal. We'll have to give that some thought.
So that means it can continue until the appeal is heard. Yeah.
Well, I'm not suggesting that it should continue.
No, but it could, couldn't it?
Effectively, it is unauthorised at present, and any further breaches of planning control will be investigated.
But there is something going noise enforcement.
Yeah, environmental health, as I alluded to, the environmental health regulations are unfettered by this decision.
But the applicant has a right until the appeal is heard to carry on, but he's got to carry on within rules of environmental health.
He doesn't have a right to carry on because it's still unauthorised development.
It just may not be expedient.
I think
it may not be quick for us to take
through you, Chairman, I think the phrase is any further development will be at the applicant's acknowledge the appellant's own risk.
Okay, thank you. You were all aware of that, correctly? Okay. Application is refused and we continue onwards. We missed some of it, so when the what was discussed? You'll probably get it before we can do the enforcement.
But that doesn't stop whoever's about taking any action because he's a separate issue.
Okay. Right, we're now in Byfield. No, we're not, we're in Daventry, but 0126 Byfield. There are two applications. We'll discuss them both together as one's listed earlier and we'll vote on them separately. Okay? As per usual.
Thanks, Chairman. As you'll see, the application site is Byfield's substantial listed building. The principal building is the square block, and there's an offshoot night building projected to the west, linked by a very simple link between the two buildings. The principal building there is obviously the larger one, the art building is obviously the smaller one, and the space between is the subject of this particular application. The art building has had previous permissions granted for conversion to ancillary accommodation, and there's further permissions given, with the link between the two buildings being retained as a simple link. There have been a lot of discussions between the conservation officer and the applicants in a way to try and solve this particular puzzle. which involves reinstating a doorway, as you can see on the arched, to provide a better link or a larger link between the two buildings. Those discussions, as I say, have taken place and have resulted in the current scheme, but on balance, officers' view is that there's still less than substantial harm to the significance of the heritage asset, and as such, that should be accorded quite significant weight in the planning balance. And in the planning balance, it's weighing that against the public benefit. Whilst these alterations will improve or make an aesthetically better connection between the two buildings for the occupants of the property in terms of the public benefit, I don't outweigh the less than substantial harm identified by the conservation officer. And accordingly, we recommend the application be refused, Chair.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah, I think it's important we see the photographs.
That's the archway that will be the doorway. And there's on the outside.
So you lose those two windows, one to a door and one to a gone. Okay. Right, local members.
Speakers, Chairman.
Right?
Speakers, Chairman.
Well, there are speakers. I do apologise, speakers. I wouldn't do that for the world. Right, Mr. Gillett, Parish Council.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members. I will not keep you long. You'll see from your pack that Byfield Parish Council originally said that we had no observations to make about this application, which was because we thought that it was an entirely appropriate development and that it would sail through. Once we heard that there was a recommendation to refuse, we wanted to come here and make it clear that we in fact support this application. Then I'll leave it to others to debate the finer points of planning law and the policy numbers and such. The officer's report reinforces that the change would cause only minor harm to the listed building. It reinforces that the historic rear doorway with fanlight has been reinstated and that the awkward relationship with the surviving early leaded window will be resolved. It further states that by employing contemporary forms and materials, it will be distinct from the historic fabric. What is proposed is a modern see-through link between the main house and outbuildings. It is not visible from the road. It is not even visible from the driveway of the property as you approach it. I guess it's probably visible from space. It may be that refusing this application will not prevent the continued use of Church End House, but what refusing it will do is to stop the creation of a modern addition to a 19th century house, allowing it to be used and enjoyed by a 21st century family. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Mr. Cox, who's the applicant.
We did submit 3 slides.
I'm sure we'll find them in a second.
And just so that you're warned, I'm going to ask for number 1, followed by number 3, followed by number 2.
We haven't started your time yet.
I was going to say.
The clock will be pressed as soon as you speak. Aha. So you want number 1 first?
Number 1 first. Then I'll go to number 3 very quickly and then okay, thank you, Chairman. The very character of Church End House comes from how it's evolved over the generations, from a humble 17th century farmhouse in its beginning through many additions and renovations to the current family home that it is. This includes a range of outbuildings which about 30 years ago were largely converted into what is now a playroom with a somewhat clumsy and dangerous narrow link to the kitchen. If I can jump to slide 3, The perspective views the proposed enhanced link drawn up by our conservation accredited architect. And what this shows is it's very modest in size, it's very secondary to the existing buildings, it's very transparent, it doesn't conceal any historic features. The simple modern form doesn't confuse the story of the earlier buildings, the current link arguably does. It could easily be removed at some future point without causing any harm. And importantly, it creates safe passage for our children and their friends and the rest of the house along the wall, through the kitchen and through the original doorway into the playroom, where they can be easily seen and heard. If we jump to number 2, I have to confess that we're somewhat baffled by the recommendation and the reasons, and I'd like to comment on 4 specific points, which I make having based on expert conservation advice. Firstly, is the proposal physically and visually significant? Well, not in our view. Bottom left is the overall site plan of the house and gardens, and bottom right, a larger scale plan of the ground floor of the tribal walled garden adjoining it. You can just about see the existing link on there, and the red line shows the transparent glazed wall of the new link. So, that's not the end, is it? So it's a very small increase in the floor plate, and it's not visible from anywhere in the world except space, and except for part of the small private walled garden that's next to it, from most of which you can also see the existing link. Secondly, does our proposal harm the building? Well, in our view, quite the opposite. We think there's significant enhancement through the removal of the modern wall that overlaps the edge of one of the few surviving early windows, the removal of the somewhat unsympathetic modern pillar and steel window from the original 17th century farmhouse front door, bringing it back into use, and the removal of the modern partition, restoring the kitchen to its original dimensions, and that's shown top left. Thirdly, is there any public interest or benefit? Absolutely there is. Aside from enhancing the important features, to me, the pure safety aspects must be in the public interest. Currently, our young children and their many friends risk injury from running diagonally across the kitchen, past the cooker, as you can see top left, and then having to navigate shoes and dogs in the narrow passageway. Instead, they'll be able to go safely down the side wall of the kitchen, out through the original doorway and into the playroom. And what about the impact on the floors, which were mentioned significantly? Well, first of all, the existing floors are about 95% modern concrete. The exception is a current bricked area in the proposed laundry, which is 19th century and about 5 square metres. The rest of that room is uneven sloping concrete, and we're advised that wooden flooring over it would run a high risk of dry rot. The current slab and plastic DPM in the playroom goes right up to the wall, causing risk of damp, which we're addressing in the proposal. And the modern slab in the kitchen is in poor condition, and it already buries anything of archaeological interest. We have, though, suggested that we work under archaeological supervision in this area. Now, I'm not massively hopeful, but it would be fantastic if we found anything of historical interest. So, in conclusion, I'm appealing for your support. We desperately want to enhance the living space to accommodate modern lives which centre around kitchens, children and their safety, and to both preserve and enhance this home for our family and for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything you want to make a comment on before?
Just 2 of the speakers have mentioned the lack of visibility from the public arenas, suggesting that it's only visible from space. The fact is that with a listed building, irrespective of whether you can see the public realm, is to be frank, irrelevant. The building is listed in its own right for its architectural and historic interest, whether it's not for the fact that it's visible from the public realm. So please bear in mind that you're entitled to take a view in terms of your view on the significance of the heritage asset and what harm, etc. But the fact that it's visible or not visible from the public realm is not one of those considerations. I'll leave it there, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Gilbert.
I presume you're going to allow me to speak, Chair Simon.
Oh, exactly. He's a gentleman. That's what
Carry on.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Have a
go, Joe.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak on this application. The application before you has been a couple of years in the making, with the applicant working in a positive and proactive manner, entering into much discussion with DDC. He secured the services of a specialist who is one of the only 2 conservation accredited architects in the whole of Northants, and a part-time conservation officer for Oxfordshire, LA. There have been 15 highly detailed drawings along with a detailed statement of significant need, design and access. This practical approach has resulted in the scheme being amended during the course of its life and becoming the proposal before you today. A great effort has been made to try and satisfy the comments of the Conservation Officer while trying to enhance and integrate the kitchen and playroom area, and in particular the link between them for safe access at the same time as trying to enhance important historic features. The application is recommended for refusal on the basis of its design, size and relationship to the historic elements of the site and the loss of historic fabric and character due to the proposed replacement of the flooring and creation of new openings, both of which are considered to be of harm with no overriding public benefit. The applicant has already addressed the design, size and relationship of the scheme, and realising your time is precious, I do not intend to repeat this, but hope that you've been able to see a reason for approval. Regarding the floor issues, the applicant has offered to employ experts, which only confirm his commitment to retaining the heritage elements of the asset. Finally, in terms of what is being achieved, there is benefit to not only the applicant but future generations of a modern, safe environment for kids and kitchen life. I know we take every application on its own merit, and we've made reference to the historic value as opposed to being seen from space. But in my reading of similar applications, there has been a recent appeal decision, Man Cottage, Claycott, Northampton, which is not similar to this application, i.e. a glazed single-storey extension in a 17th century listed building which was renovated in the 1980s. Very similar. The outcome of that recommendation was to refuse and approve the application. It was considered that notwithstanding the evolution of the glazed extension, the asset still retained its architectural and historic significance. Quoting direct from the appeal, and again I know you take every application on its own merit, the inspectorate decided that the extension would be of a lower status addition to the existing house, being subservient in terms of its size, scale and materials, as is this application, and that the resulting degree of visual separation would retain the integrity of the listed building, again as this application would. In the decision, the inspector paid special regards to the desirability of preserving the listed building and its setting and the guidance within paragraph 1 through 2 of the National Planning Policy Framework, which sets out that when considering the impact of a proposed development on the significance of a designated heritage asset, great weight should also be given to the asset's conservation. The proposed glazed extension would preserve the character, appearance and significance of the sun tower, which would be protected by the elements from the glazing. As I said, I know each application is just on its own merit, but these were reasons stated for approving it, a similar application by the inspectorate. To summarise, I would ask that we take a constructive and practical approach to the proposal before us, which is focused on looking for solutions, and ask that you now consider the application to be an acceptable scheme. It is always a challenge to ensure historic features are retained whilst creating a modern family home. I feel the proposal before you has done this.
Thank you, Councillor Guildford. Councillor Patrick.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just wondering how I was going to follow that actually, but I quickly at least. I do as I'm told, of course, in our board hierarchy. Well, first of all, I shall read paragraph 60 of the NPPF, which is very short. It says, planning policies and decisions should not attempt to impose architectural styles or particular tastes, and it should not stifle innovation, which of course this is. Originality or sanitary requirements. Sorry, it's long. Yeah. To confirm certain development formal styles whatsoever proper to seek to promote reinforce local distinctiveness. This is a one-off, it's very local and very distinctive. Earlier on this evening you heard me state that I know this house very well because it's the village fete is held in the grounds on the house each year. Most of the village turn up, there's sort of 600 houses or so, and a good percentage of the village turn up, and if that is the public benefit in retaining the property for future use, I don't know what you would call public benefit. The paragraph 17 of the NPPF says there's good standards of amenity should be sought for all existing and future occupiers. Paragraph 14 says that we should approve without delay unless there's demonstrable harm, and I'll refer to page 93, which is the bottom of the impact assessment of impact, which also refers to paragraph 6 of the NPPF. As you've already heard, the glazed part of the proposal will retain and better reveal the historic window, and to reopen and provide new means of access into the glazed link would also be a benefit to the house and its occupants for future. To conclude, I can only say that I would like to propose that we support this application for the reasons that I've given. That's it, Chairman. Right.
Did you actually make a proposal?
I make a proposal
right.
to
Do you have
support
a
the application.
Councillor, behind you. Before you say anything, or before we continue, it's that dreaded time of 9:15 where you have to vote to continue.
I think you should do that at the end of the item, Chairman.
Yeah.
I don't think we can do it in the middle.
No, it's 9:15.
Yeah, strictly speaking, you shouldn't do it in the middle of the night.
Oh, right.
Because we couldn't vote to go home.
No, do.
Can I suggest we carry on?
He's bigger than me. Anyway, we carry on. We're going to carry on anyway, I hope, whether we vote on this or not. So anyway, Councillor Research, do you want to speak on seconding that? No. Okay. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I wanted to correct something that Councillor Guilford said about a similar application. Appeal decision. Firstly, it's called Clay Coden and not Clay Cotton.
Oh, sorry.
Secondly, I know this property very well because I've been involved with that application over a number of years, and it's not similar. I think it's confusing to say that just because it involved a glazed extension to a listed building, it's a similar situation. It's not. The argument used in the officer's report in recommending refusal says quite clearly there is no clear and convincing justification of this harm and no overriding public benefit. So I would not be able to support the proposition.
Thank you. Councillor Chandler. Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. Not too long ago we had an application at Broadston on a listed building, not too dissimilar application. One of my colleagues actually suggested if we refused it, the applicant could put an umbrella up and walk between the two. Now, the serious side of this is that, as with the Broadston, you shouldn't compare applications, but if you look at that drawing on the screen at the moment, can you see anything wrong with it? Now, perhaps the officer could blow it up larger, but the important part of it is that it is transparent. For want of a better way of putting it, it is a temporary structure. I would suggest there's probably lead flashing to go into the roof line. But as with all listed buildings, and I can feel my colleague behind me, the heritage champion, breathing down my neck, but all listed buildings evolve. And the character of a listed building is because it has evolved. Public benefit. There is no public benefit to this whatsoever. I can't see it. However, there's a lot of benefit to the inhabitants. The sight from the view that we're given here certainly doesn't detract in any way, shape or form. You can argue that the roof line is higgledy-piggledy, or they've had to make the best of all the angles. Well, I think they've made a tremendous job of all the angles and provided that it stays as transparent as it is in that drawing. Unfortunately, I will have to go against officers' advice, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooke. Councillor Irving Swift, then Councillor Frenchman.
As I live in a listed house, I know how difficult it is sometimes to have alteration. And the public benefit, it is a privilege to live in listed houses, and I'm sure the owner of this listed house loves his house much more than any of us. And when you live in a house that has a privilege to be listed, you don't want to do awful things to it when it's come to your, if you use the right architect and right professional, you know how the house will function. Yes, it didn't exist, but it's just a glass structure. My only concern is the PVC, but that is maybe better, so like that you show the new structure in comparison to the other. So I think we should not stifle change, and this doesn't add anything that cannot be removed in the future. And the public benefit is when you live in a listed house, that is the public benefit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Frenchman.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could just seek a clarification in the reasons for refusal, as well as the extension or the infill that we're talking about. It also talks about the loss of historic fabric, which we don't appear to have covered in any way, shape or form, and it says, and the loss of historic fabric and character arising from the proposed replacement flooring. Could you elaborate on that side? Have I missed what that actually is?
I think I said it in the report. It's the removal of the flagstones, etc.
But somebody said that it was all concrete.
It's concrete.
Right. If you go to page 25. Frozen concrete floors will remain housed in buildings incorporate insulation and damp membranes and underfloor system. New floor structure would require excavating existing surfaces and the creation of level flooring throughout the affected spaces. These works would involve the removal of remnant historic floors, including stone flags in the kitchen that survive beneath the modern tiles of concrete screed and brick stable. These extant flooring materials are of historic interest. The works may also disturb or destroy any archaeological evidence surviving below the current floors of various surfaces or structures. Whilst the application notes that stone flags beneath the modern flooring in the kitchen are in poor condition, there will be no further investigation of the condition and potential for restoration.
Thank you, I had missed that. So, I mean, I think that's an area that we've not really covered. Everyone's been concentrating on just the link part of it. And obviously a historic building is more than just, you know, a link unit. I think that the current owners of any house are only the trustees of that house for the next generation, and therefore it should remain both usable, but also in as much as the listing status says that led it to be listed in the first place. So I'm not sure if I can support any not going against I would have to support officer's advice.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
I must say I agree with Councillor Frenchman for once, and I also agree with the officer as well, which doesn't often happen either. But I've been here. No, I meant about one of these, but we've had these in the past. The links. I've been here, been on this committee many years, and you'll also know, Chairman, when you sat here, we had a link come through. We've had two in the past that have come through and kept coming through, and they were never right. They were never right because of the flooring, because of the attachment, because of everything. And I totally agree with everything that's in the report. Unfortunately, I do feel sorry for the applicant, but like Councillor Frenchman has just pointed out, I do believe that a person that lives in a listed building, that they are just a keeper of it and carry on. There's, you know, if everybody does add extra things on that they think is okay, then you know, where's it going to end? It's got to end. It's got to be justified. So yeah, I totally agree with the report.
Thank you. Oh, rather,
Can I come back? Chair, I'm on page 95.
Oh, it will be quick.
Proposed new concrete floors within the main house outbuilding incorporated the new floor structure will require excavating existing surface and creation of level flooring throughout the place. Works would involve removal of historic floors, including stone flags in the kitchen, which survive beneath modern tiles and a concrete street. Well, now there you can't see them at the moment. May I suggest that, you know, a solution to the problem is that in this day and age, Yorkstone, ancient Yorkstone flagstones are available, and a condition could be that the floors are replaced with Yorkstone of the period.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. We'll go back to. You wish to speak, Councillor Paget?
Yeah, can I just remind members of a couple of paragraphs of the MPPF?
You can indeed, if that quickly.
Yeah, well, paragraph 126, which isn't used in the reasons for refusal, but it says that the significance of the heritage asset must be adoptable, viable use. And then paragraph 131, which is used in the reasons for refusal, states that sustaining and enhancing the significance of the heritage asset must be taken into consideration. And then 134 also mentions that the heritage asset should be optimum viable use. And with regard to public benefit, as I said earlier, 600 people that turn up at the Bicycle Fete once a year, it is definitely a public benefit that should be retained.
Can I just go back on that, Chairman? I mean, the issue of public benefit, I mean, it's demonstrating directly between this link and the public benefit. I mean, nobody's saying that the building is not a significant building, it doesn't contribute to the local community. It's the awkward arrangement that exists between the principal listed building and the art building, which has been the subject of quite a lot of discussions between the applicant's conservation consultant and your conservation officer. But simply, we've reached an issue where they have to agree to disagree against the recommendation before committee tonight. I don't think that the public benefit of fates, etc., is necessarily a tangible link to the merits of this particular application.
Could I just ask one more question? Could the officers tell me the reason why the building was listed in the first place?
I would have to consult with English Heritage and also consult with the listing itself. That will simply provide a description of the listing.
Chairman, I think when the officer says English Heritage, he means Heritage England.
English Heritage at the time.
Okay.
Just check the listings.
We're going to get to a vote, I believe. Well, do you reckon you can answer that question by looking in one of those files now?
Well, the fact is the building is listed. The reasons for the listing English heritage or heritage English as we are now, we'll simply list the features that are of importance.
What I'm getting at is that the changes aren't affecting the actual significance of the listing and what is that, why the building was listed in the first place.
I think for members to come to that conclusion, members would have to identify that there is no harm to the listed building. Yeah. You have officers advised before you tonight, members, that the proposal would lead to less than substantial harm, and consequently there is a test to be passed, and that test is that where there is harm identified, that has to be weighed against public benefit. It's only where there is no harm identified that I feel that members could continue to look with that proposal for approval.
The report quite clearly states minor harm rather than less than substantial harm.
It goes on to state less than substantial harm continuing the reason for refusal.
Can you find anything else?
Yeah, I found a series of listings, but
Yeah, I can't find a name on English heritage.
May I suggest,
let me
Chairman,
go back to at the end of the day, I mean, just look at this, Church Street, East Side, Church End, Western Classic Hall, former rectory, back range, 17th century, front range, early 18th century, late 18th century, and late 19th century alterations. This is a quote directly from the listing. Ironstone, ashlar, tile roofs, stone and stacks, central staircase plan, 2 stories and attic, 5 window range, central door in late 19th century, 2-story porch with skin course and plain parapet. 2 plate glass sash windows either side to ground and first floors with molded stone surrounds, chamfered plinth, foins and molded stone eaves, 3 gabled roof dormers, stone coped gables with kneelers, large 2-story bay to the left hand side, lower 17th century range to rear with 1-story 19th century canvas bay window to left side with plate glass sash, timber lintel to first floor, attached wall to right corner, enclosing garden. Interior has good late 18th century open well staircase with stick balusters, carved tread ends and ramped mahogany handrail. I should point out that these listings, they can either be very brief or very detailed. The fact is the building's listed, so everything, both inside and outside the building, and every effect it is listed. So even if it's not mentioned in the listing description itself, it doesn't render it any less significant to the understanding of the building itself.
Hold on a second, one person.
But since you're taking that information into account, the glazed link is actually protecting the thing that is listed, and the flooring, which isn't listed and covered by concrete, isn't a minor thing to be listing.
That's simply incorrect. The floor is part of the history of the building, therefore listed.
Okay, well I think we've gone through a lot of issues there. We've had a reasonable debate. We've got a proposal, and we're looking at the first application first, not the listed building one. We'll get to that one second. We've got a proposal. Presumably you're proposing for both of them and seconding for both of them.
That would be correct, yeah.
Sorry?
Yes, yeah.
That's correct. Right, so there's a proposal which has been seconded that the first application be refused. All those in favour? Sorry, approved, I think the opposite. All those in favour, please show.
What are we voting for? Sorry, I missed it now.
To approve the application.
Right, those against? Right, the application is approved. Now the second part.
At what juncture can we include conditions, Chair?
We're going to suggest those in a minute. But let's do the listed building one first. This is the other half of it. So you're voting whether to approve the listed building as proposed. The listed building consent, I beg your pardon. Those in favour, please show. Those against? 3. Again, the listed building application is allowed. No conditions. Have you got suggestions, Evan?
I think that should come to the members, sir. I'll quite gladly assist. So I think it should come to the members.
Right. Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Chair. My suggestion is that merely that building materials be approved before the work commences.
Right, any other? Councillor Paul?
That the design and the application has shown being regarded as a temporary structure, so that any new inhabitants could take it away without detriment to the existing building. But I make the point again about the flooring. If there is evidence there of York stone floor, then I think the applicant wouldn't have any problem in reviewing the flooring with period York stone.
I think Councillor Paul probably is what you're saying is right, but it is wrong with a listed building to do that. You would not do it.
Of course.
Okay.
Could I suggest in...
Sorry.
Go on,
Sorry, Chairman, can I just, I mean, you heard the applicants talk, there's no disagreement that the floor, whether it's visible or not, is part of the historic fabric. The applicant has agreed to some form of archaeological recording work, and I would encourage members to look at that type of condition, so that any remnants of historic fabric of the original building or whatever is properly recorded and potentially reused in any renovations that take place, rather than be lost for eternity to the building itself.
As a planning committee first, I would like to say, in the words of Meatloaf, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Right, so you're happy with the conditions that you stated?
No, I'm listening to you this afternoon.
Go for the rest of the words.
Again,
Is that okay?
well, again, Chairman, the point is permission's been given for the building. It cannot be tied to being temporary. It will now become part of the fabric of the listed building itself.
Will it itself become listed then?
That's a good question. I don't think it's in itself will become listed because it's obviously been out since it's listed, but it's an interest.
Okay, we must move on. The application is approved, both of those applications.
Do we have a vote now, Chair?
Yeah. No. Do you want to carry on or not? Okay, you put your hands up so we've had a vote.
Are we allowed a short comfort break?
Is there anybody who wants a short comfort break? Okay, we've got two people with problems.
This problem works in mine.
So I'm running.
That's all. 2 minutes.
Don't worry, I'm here. There's a mobile phone in the chamber.
You won't be able to take part in the next one else if you
I'm
don't
actually
come back.
saying good night to my husband because I haven't seen him and won't see him till tomorrow. Is that all right?
Can I just grab the kids?
You're right, mate. That was funny. There you go. All right then, mate.
It is pretty obvious.
We've got some more applications.
Alan?
Yeah.
Oh, we've been done.
Three left. Three.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right then, darling. All right, thank you. All right.
you know, it's council.
Yeah.
Shan't come out.
Councillor Paul, Gary says lucky too. And he blew a kiss back. You ain't got one.
How many are we missing now? Just the two that are problem, yeah?
Well, it wasn't just two.
Yeah, just two. Fraction and magic. Diana, can you see them out there?
They're dawdling. Yeah, they're on the way back. After getting a drink. Come on, Bob.
It's Bob's fault.
So you chose that.
Right, next application is 0193. It's in Colwishby. There is one in Abbey South, and the only reason it's on it is because it's a member of an officer of the family.
Yes.
As it wouldn't be on.
Thanks, Chairman. The property sits within the time limits. As you can see from the photograph, the modest single-storey semi-detached bungalow. Recently approved permission for an extension to the rear, and this application is proposed to mirror the extension approved on the adjoining property. No impact on the amenity of the adjoining neighbours, no impact on street side. Accordingly, officers are recommending the application be approved, Chairman.
Can I have a
Yes.
Castle?
Excuse me, you did this last time.
I think.
How dare you?
She's lovely. Councillor Egg.
Thank you very much.
Should I say
My
something about you?
last time you I don't have a problem with this. You can't see the amendment from the road. You can't see it from the back. There's a big hedge between that and Tesco's car park. It will make the back of the two buildings look better. The 60-degree was only because the next door neighbour, it would stop the light. Since then, the neighbour has been granted an extension, and she's waiting for this one so that they do them together, and they will both be the same at the back. So I propose an approval.
Thank you, Councillor. Is all these have the same?
Agree. Just wondered if the building was listed.
Okay. There's a proposal that the application be approved. All those in agreement, please show. That's unanimous. All right, thank you. No, there can't be any against. I've tried to get to Colwishby quicker, but we're in Colwishby now. 0193.
Chairman. Chairman, the site you see before you is it's an application that's come in as a result, really following a previous application for a much larger site that the council refused. That said, the southern part of the site, which is now the subject of this application, sits between existing buildings and, in our view, sits within the confines of the village. It's on the site of the old bowling green, which has long been since disused, adjoining land. The application is an application for outline consent for residential development up to 5 dwellings. As you'll see from the report, there are no technical reasons for opposing the application. Although concerns have been raised about surface water drainage, boil water, etc. Our views of the proposal can be adequately mitigated through conditions as part of any reserved matters applications. The main issue that rests between officers and the applicant, as alluded to in the late representations, is really the application of the threshold for which affordable housing should be secured. Currently, policy in the Joint Core Strategy advocates the SPD, which falls under that policy, advocates a threshold of 5 dwellings or more in villages, and accordingly advised that affordable housing should be secured on this site as part of the resolution. The applicants consider that as a result of ministerial statements which have taken place since the joint core strategy was issued, feel that the SPD and policy have been superseded by those particular statements which advise that a higher threshold of 10 units should apply, and therefore the site would not fall within that. From our point of view, in terms of the purpose of the resolution tonight, members are being asked to agree the resolution to approve the principle of development with a Section 106 agreement. Officers are very much tied to the primacy of policy in this particular case. That said, we recognise that there is a need to continue dialogue with the applicants in respect of whether or not ministerial statements outweigh that. That discussion really needs to take place outside that as part of the Section 106 agreement. Clearly, if agreement can't be reached, then officers would advise members that we would bring the application back to committee for further consideration in terms of whether or not it is going to secure affordable housing or not. But for the purpose of the resolution is based on agreeing the principle and securing affordable housing. Accordingly, we're recommending that the principle before the committee tonight.
Thank you. Two speakers. Mr. Rhodes is against the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I live at number 1 Bridle Lane, which, if you can see from the picture there, is where the mouse is handily hovering. I'm speaking on behalf of a number of objectors on Bridle Lane and Main Street who are understandably disappointed that this outline application has been recommended for approval, particularly as no consideration appears to have been given to the impact on adjacent properties. From a personal perspective, I'm especially concerned about property number 5 shown on the plans, as it's proposed to be less, if my reading of the scale is correct, less than 5 metres from the rear of my own property, resulting in loss of light, loss of privacy and additional noise and disturbance. In terms of loss of light, currently my property has windows on both the ground floor and first floor in the master bedroom, and I believe that light will be significantly, light into these rooms will be significantly reduced should property number 5 be built just a few metres from these windows. Moving on, loss of privacy on a similar theme. Again, we can't see from any of the drawings what the eastern aspect of property number 5 in particular would look like. I'm expecting that there will be windows on that side of the property that would overlook our garden and rear windows. And then finally, on noise and disturbance, you'll see there are 2 parking spaces proposed there against the western edge of my property. I'm concerned that the additional noise and disturbance as a result of those cars would be a significant concern. I'm not really clear from the plans what the proposed street lighting is either for this new development, but again, I'm concerned that that would cause additional light pollution for us and other neighbouring properties. Wider concerns from the village perspective have already been addressed to an extent around flooding and drainage. As I left to come here this evening, around Ivy Cottage on the left-hand side there, there are sandbags all around the property as a result of recent flooding, and I can't help but think that the addition of 5 more properties to an already overstretched water system is only going to exacerbate the issues that are currently being experienced every winter and spring as a result of heavy rain. And then finally, road safety. The proposed access road that you see there is very close to the junction of Main Street and Stamford Road, a very busy road with a lot of parked cars, and we are concerned for children playing in the area that any additional traffic volume very close to that junction would be a road safety concern moving forwards. On the basis of those arguments, I would like the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Right, the applicant, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, members. My name is Paul Johnson of Francis Jackson Homes. Our application proposals before you tonight are for a small-scale infill development of 5 dwellings within the confines of Cold Ashby. Both the principle of development and siting of the access have been confirmed as fully acceptable by your officers in Northamptonshire County Highways. There are no technical issues outstanding, and all other design and layout matters will be fully addressed at reserved matters stage. We are delighted to have an officer recommendation of approval on this basis. However, on publication of the committee report, we were very concerned with the caveat to that recommendation requiring the completion of a 106 agreement to secure provision for 40% affordable housing. On the 28th of November 2014, Brandon Lewis MP delivered to Parliament a written ministerial statement on support for small-scale developers, custom and self-builders. This introduced changes to national planning policy and abstract from which states, due to the disproportionate burden of developer contributions on small-scale developers for sites of 10 units or less and which have a maximum combined gross floor space of 1,000 square metres, affordable housing and tariff-style contributions should not be sought. Having raised this with your officers prior to committee, they view the change to national planning policy as guidance only. We respectfully wish to bring this important and very recent change in national planning policy to members' attention. The effect is that below the threshold of 10 dwellings and 1,000 square metres, the West Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy policies on affordable housing thresholds are rendered out of date. As the most recent expression of government policy on affordable housing, planning decisions on sites of this scale must be in accord with it, and not the affordable housing policy of the Core Strategy or the SPD. Policy SA of the Core Strategy itself confirms that where policies within it are deemed out of date, this is the course to take. Whilst your officers disagree, South Northants Council, who share the same policy, H2, and 5 dwelling threshold within the core strategy, now use the national planning policy threshold of 10 dwellings in decision-making with regard to affordable houses. Your neighbours at Harbour District Council also are giving national policy precedence over their adopted core strategy. Critically, in a written statement to Parliament in March 2015, the Right Honourable Eric Pickles confirmed unequivocally, we have previously revised national policy on Section 106 thresholds to help small builders. Some councils have misinterpreted the ministerial statement of the 28th of November as just a change in guidance. To clarify, this was a change in national policy and we will be updating the online planning guidance policy website to make this crystal clear. As such, the requirement for affordable housing on the site is not supported by recent and up-to-date national planning policy, well below both national thresholds. Therefore, we respectfully ask members to support your officer's recommendation and approve this planning application, but to do so without the caveat of requiring a Section 106 agreement to secure affordable housing. The recent significant shift in national policy is not something that can simply be ignored, and we ask members to give this matter full weight in their consideration, given the very clear changes to national policy which do not require contributions to affordable housing on small sites such as these. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Local member. Ah, it is you.
Yes, it is.
Councillor Chandler.
It is I, Chairman. Thank you. Some members may remember that a previous application that has been referred to, which was for double the size of this and 10 dwellings, and that was refused. But during the negotiations on that one, an indication was given that an application of this size might be looked on slightly more favourably, but it was only an indication that it was therefore perhaps worth making the application. I wanted to make a couple of points based on what we've heard already. Yes, the access, which is the only finalised bit of this application, everything else is reserved. The access is very near to the junction on Stanford Road. Members may not realise that a bit further along Stanford Road in that direction is the Coldashbury Golf Club, which is a very successful golf club, and so there is traffic from people who are not local, and so they would need to take special care. We ask them to do that anyway, because if anybody's tried to drive through Coldashbury, you'll realise that it's not a recommended through route. Unfortunately, a lot of HGV drivers don't know that. So the Highways Department has said, yes, we've looked at that, and we are not objecting. The potential flooding, reference to Ivy Cottage is unfortunate because it's not really relevant to this application. Ivy Cottage, which is on the opposite side of that road, is built on ground which is below road level, so every time it rains, the drainage from the road finishes up in their garden, and they don't like that, but unfortunately, if you buy a house that's below ground level, then it's going to get wet. I know, I live in one. The third point I want to make about the concerns from the occupant of number 1 Bridle Lane concerning the proximity of property number 5 and the proximity of parking vehicles. You must remember that that layout is indicative only and will be thrashed out at reserve matter stage. And finally, our dear friend, the departed Mr. Pickles, had a reputation for issuing statements and pretending that they were changes in policy, which they didn't quite have that status, I'm afraid. And I've seen this debated several times in planning hearings by some very prominent planning lawyers who would say quite openly and frankly, just because Mr. Pickles wants something to happen, it can't just happen like that. There is a process to go through. And it is my understanding that although there has been 2 ministerial statements saying that that's what they'd like to do, that the policy has not yet changed. But perhaps the officer can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I think you're right. I think the point that is being made, sorry to you, Chairman, is that ministerial statements are capable of being material considerations, but having had regard to the concerns of the applicants, our policy section are still strongly advising on the primacy of the policy. Now, that hasn't been tested.
No, I understand that.
Clearly, the purpose of the resolution is to allow those negotiations to continue. Clearly, if we get legal advice to say you really should give ministerial statements strong consideration, then we may be coming back to committee and saying, yeah, the principle's fine, but that's something that's ongoing.
Thank you, and that could be dealt with later. So, following that helpful advice, Chairman, I would like to propose that we follow officer's advice and approve this application.
Thank you. Do you have a second? Councillor Paul. Legal member might say so?
I want to just clarify, I mean, I entirely agree with what Councillor Johnson says. We get to have in the annals of legal history the law according to Mr. Pickles, which I'm sure will no doubt refer to with interest, but as an archive. But the reality is, and the position we've always had with planning policy guidance is that it was guidance. You go right back to cases like Bramford Court marking, it's always been quite clear that it is to be treated as guidance. And unfortunately, some legislators have sought to give it some kind of an elevated status. Is it a material consideration? Yes, it is. But so too is a properly consulted affordable housing SPP. The issue is that there is a slight conflict between those, and that's a matter for each authority to determine, and it's open to people to mount a legal challenge on those if they see fit. So far, nobody has.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Right. Any more contributions? Oh, yes, Councillor Matthew.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I mean, I think, I don't agree with the local member, actually. I think that, and I do have some sympathy for Mr. Rhodes in the proximity of the plot 5 to his property. And of course, if you really wanted to get rid of the affordable housing issue one way or the other, the permission for 4 houses would be, lots 1 to 4 would be acceptable in my frame of mind, although that's not what we've got here tonight. So you kill 2 birds with 1 stone and then the problem. But that's just my opinion.
Again, through you, Chairman, that is an illustrative drawing. The reserve manager will pick up details of design, including the impact on neighbouring properties. Looking at that illustrative layout, I can come up with a number of solutions that could move the property further away. It means rejigging, but that's not what's before committee or before the council this evening. The application quite clearly says construction of 5 dwellings, not up to 5 dwellings. So that is what members are being asked to consider. The details will certainly take into account the impact on the amenity of neighbouring properties, and we'll seek to mitigate that through detailed discussions and detailed design of that.
I guess what I was getting at, Chairman, is that I think there's no development of the site.
Well,
they
haven't showed you yet how they're going to develop the site. Councillor Champa.
Chair, I missed a point. When I mentioned the flooding, what I meant to say was that it's quite easy, and I think it's already been mentioned, to make a requirement that the development should not enhance the runoff from what is there already. Developers are well able to do that, so that it will be no worse than it is now.
Thank you, Councillor Chapel. We've got a proposal that the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. Those against? 2. The application is approved.
Now we finished that, the discussion we just had about affordable housing and the threshold has caused considerable consternation amongst parish councils. I feel it would be useful if the development, the planning department was to issue some sort of guidance to parish councils, because it is causing some angst and upsetment, if that's even a word, because they don't understand it and obviously look to the professionalism.
It's causing angst this side as well.
Yeah. But we just had a lawyer verdict.
We've got some training coming in July which will incorporate that for parishes.
Will it?
Parishes have asked for training
Yeah.
on what it exists.
Yeah.
And that's for parishes specifically. I think this would be very good to incorporate what we know by the 1st of July into that arrangement.
Excellent, that's fine. Thank you for that, Maria.
Next application is 0213 in Brixworth.
Thank you, Chair. I should be very brief as we're coming into 10 o'clock. Basically, it's a 2-storey brick building of modern design by the developers of similar properties in terms of the style of the design. The proposal seeks to increase the ridge height and retain the eaves height, but to increase the ridge height by 1 metre to allow the roof to be used as additional accommodation for the provision of 2 bedrooms and a shower room. From our officer's point of view, the increase of the ridge height by 1 metre would not have any adverse impacts on the street scene. There are similar properties within the same estate on both Broxhill, Crescent and Shellowcoats Road, which demonstrate a similar increase in ridge height to accommodate further living quarters. As a consequence, we're recommending this application be approved, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. We have a speaker, Mr. Berry, who's the applicant.
Hello. Thank you, especially at this late hour. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to raise a few points. One was prior to my application, I spoke to my neighbours to see if they had any objections with what was being proposed, and they didn't. And the reason for going for a pitch rather than just creating a dormer on the back of the property, I thought would be more in keeping with what was already there. After that, I actually went for a pre-application stage, and that was dealt with by a lady called Sue Barnes, who said on balance I feel that the proposal would, to increase the roof pitch would be preferable to dormers, which is also absent in the locality. And obviously this application just said there's a recommendation for approval. I just wanted to show you a couple of photographs. Photo 1, which you're looking at now, is a Google Maps photo of the end of Shelleycoats, so the road that I'm in, and that's showing varying pictures of roof heights in those 4 properties. So that's just to give you an example of that happening. The second photo also demonstrates that in Froxhill Crescent, which my road backs onto. You can see it's a bit of a fuzzy photo, but the middle property you can see the apexes at the background, again showing there's many different heights and pitches of roof there. And the final photo is a more recent development, which is also on Froxhill Crescent, just to the right of the primary school, which has that kind of pitch angle that would be in my property. You can see there's some dormers there. So it's really just to show the fact that those different variances in heights already do exist on the actual estate, and I just wanted to share that information with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Local member? There's 2 local members, right. Councillor Barrett first. I'm getting fingers.
That's fine, I'm good. Thank you very much, Chairman. And can I just pray your indulgence, councillors, for this last lap of this marathon. I hope it doesn't end like the original one did. Let's know the history. The application is approved by our Senior Planning Officer, Keith Thursfield. It's simply an application, as I see, to raise the roof of a building that's existing and also to add some roof lights into it. I did have concerns about the roof lights' height. The applicant has indeed increased the height of those lights to increase the privacy of the surrounding property. And the back one, I believe, is being glazed in opaque sort of glass, so people can't see out so well. It's not a huge commercial development. It's simply, as I see it, and this is an important point, it's a householder extending his family home. The two options, I think the applicant alluded to one of them. He could extend out the back. That could be done in a rather obtrusive, ugly manner, in my opinion. He could do it without planning permission. But he's chosen to do it in a less obtrusive way, to use the roof space, which, in my view, will not be so obtrusive. Of course, it needs planning permission, so here it is this evening. He's not adding an extra brick-built story to the house, although there will be 3 levels. It is just raising the roof, as I said, by 1 metre or 3 feet in old money, is what we're really talking about, just a bit of extra space. As far as impact is concerned, it is the end of the road, so clearly it doesn't overlook people at all, and importantly the neighbours have been consulted, as we've heard, and have no complaints about it. And I think that it is far preferable to have this particular development than the addition onto the back. The effect on the street scene, it's a large estate, it's established, it was the estate was started in the 1970s, and frankly, in my opinion, it's not very impressive architecture anywhere, and I can say that because I live there, in my house is as guilty as many. Not bad houses, but not outstanding or listed buildings at all, and that's a characteristic of that, so I don't think the street scene. In fact, our own officer said it might make the street scene more interesting even to have the different ridge heights. We're talking of 3 feet, not a great deal at all. I think the development simply reflects the needs of the family, and they need more space to stretch their home. They can either go up or they can go out. They've decided to go upwards rather than outwards. As far as I can see, that's the best of the two. I can see no conflicts in those in their intentions with policies GM2 or indeed with EN42, which are the 2 key policies that have been mentioned. I see no material reason to oppose it, and let's just keep it in perspective. It's raising the roof by 3 foot, that's all it is. Far better than the alterations that would give a negative effect to the street scene if an alternative was taken, in my view. I think there's absolutely minimal effect on the street scene, in my opinion. So very briefly, to draw it to a close, Chairman, to summarise, amendments have been made to improve the privacy of neighbours. The effect on the street scene, I would argue, would be minimal. It's far better than the alternative way of extension, which wouldn't need permission even. And I think it is lawful and complies with regulations. Of course, under NPPF, we should give our permission. In granting this permission to raise that roof 3 foot or so, this 1980s style estate, I don't think it will make Brixworth the eyesore of the Midlands, nor will it deter tourists. I would propose we simply approve this application.
Thank you. Do you have a second? Well, Councillor Barker.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I believe this would actually alter the street scene, as there's no extension of this type in the immediate area, with roof lights raising roof, or I should say raising at the ridge height. That was noted by the case officer. However, I do note that roof lights have now been increased, which wasn't in the original application. A dormer would be allowed under permitted developments down the back, and so would roof lights to the back. I'm unsure actually if roof lights would be allowed to the front of the house, but I believe that is the case. But I'm sure one of the case officers have told me if I'm right or wrong on that. On balance, I agree with the case officer, as the alternative would be totally out of keeping to the area and the neighbours. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Are you seconding the proposal or not?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to speak on it? If Councillor Carr,
thank you, Chair. Very quickly, as a ward councillor for one of the latest developments on Middlemore, anybody who's been up there or would like to venture up there, you'll see the properties are all different shapes and sizes and roof and everything else. And I mean, that's what's so nice about the area. If you go back to the old, dare say, 70 style of the Grange estate in Daventry, you'll see that most of the properties have got the same ridge level, and there's no character there whatsoever. So I think, you know, that I have to follow the recommendation for approval, and I don't see any problem by adding a metre or so to a roof ridge.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Right, we've got a proposal that the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Should be right, don't go yet, because there's one more item for Thursday Christmas, which is verbal.
This is an application on the development of power notification for telecommunications development. Under the current delegation scheme, we're required to bring these to the planning committee. Failure to issue a decision within 56 days would result in a deemed consent for the prior approval, which is the reasons why I understand this going to the planning committee. This particular proposal relates to replacement of an existing telecommunications mast in order to facilitate the rollout of the 4G coverage. The site lies to the north of the West Coast Main Line, to the north of Kilsby, just off the A5. In our view, prior notification relates to council deciding whether or not prior approval is required as to the site and appearance. In our view, it's a replacement of an existing mast. We don't consider that prior approval is required. We intend to advise the applicant if members are minded to agree to that advice.
Agree.
Oh, the applicant, please.
I'm quite happy not to.
You are so good.
Percent how things are going.
I'll give you the option. If they vote against it, you can speak. If they vote for it, we'll leave you like that. Is it your wish that they be given it?
Yeah.
Please.
Yes.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Yes.